Hoping to ease her family's worries, a young woman contemplates her potential engagement at a crowded gathering. Minerva Bartnett officially meets Geoffrey Mortmain, a man she initially perceives as kind and sincere, who thanks her for accepting his proposal and suggests they discuss their future over lunch. Excusing himself before their formal greeting, Geoffrey promises to return quickly after taking care of an urgent matter. Left waiting, Minerva looks around the ornate, empty hall. Wondering where her future husband disappeared to just before their families are meant to meet, Minerva spots a hidden hallway. Peeking around the corner, she gasps in shock upon finding Geoffrey intimately holding his maid. Caressing the weeping maid's face, Geoffrey tenderly assures Lily that she is the only woman he truly loves. He swears his eternal love for Lily, even as he prepares to marry the Duke's daughter, Minerva Bartnett. Concealed by the shadows, Minerva silently overhears the entire betrayal. Tears streaming down her face, Lily laments that high society will never accept a commoner like her, especially since Geoffrey is the heir to House Mortmain. Cradling her stomach, Lily dreads the reality that she will have to pretend Minerva is the true mother of their unborn child. Geoffrey pleads for Lily's understanding, explaining that he cannot marry a commoner or allow their child to carry the stigma of illegitimacy. Standing stoically outside the secret passage, Minerva listens as Lily voices her doubts that the Duke's daughter would ever accept such a twisted arrangement. Smiling cruelly, Geoffrey dismisses Minerva's feelings entirely, pointing out that no other noble would dare take her as an official wife anyway. He reminds Lily that high society already views Minerva as damaged goods, exiled for her alleged cruelty toward Crown Princess Celica and abandoned by Prince Filbert. Overjoyed by his callousness, Lily eagerly asks if he will continue to love her forever instead of making Minerva his real wife, to which Geoffrey immediately agrees. Geoffrey reveals his dark plan to use the secret passage to spend every night with Lily, promising to send Minerva to heaven once the baby is safely born. Hearing Lily pledge to endure anything so they can raise their child together happily, Minerva's eyes narrow with a cold, devastating realization. Slipping away unnoticed, a disgraced Minerva bitterly mocks herself for expecting anything better from the only type of man willing to marry her. The imposing exterior of House Bartnett stands quietly against the sky. Inside the estate, the Bartnett family sits together in a suffocating, tense silence. A handsome, serious-looking family member listens closely with narrowed eyes. Two younger men in the room glare with poorly concealed frustration and anger. Their mother, Agnes, sits nervously wringing her hands alongside the somber men. Duke Bartnett grimly announces that Geoffrey confessed to everything, from keeping Lily as his mistress to his murderous plot to kill Minerva and claim the illegitimate child as hers. Arms crossed, a male relative notes that even the Marquis and Marchioness Mortmain were left speechless by the scandal, knowing high society will devour the gossip. Remaining perfectly composed, Minerva stops her brother Justin from challenging Geoffrey to a duel, stating that the treacherous man will answer for his crimes. Exhausted by her cursed romantic life, Minerva recalls meeting the deceitful Geoffrey at 18, just a year after her engagement to Prince Filbert was shattered by vicious slander. Her brother Marcus explodes in a furious tirade, shouting that Prince Filbert is absolute trash for throwing Minerva away for some shady otherworldly girl after everything she endured. Colin physically restrains Marcus from marching out to punch both Filbert and Geoffrey, reminding his brother that assaulting royalty is out of the question despite his own rage. The family remains deeply anxious about the otherworldly girl, Celica, who is seemingly still plotting to ruin Minerva's life. The brothers exchange helpless, furious glances as the weight of the royal conspiracy bears down on them. Sinking into her memories, Minerva thinks back to the exact events that unfolded about a year ago regarding Celica. She vividly remembers Celica suddenly appearing in their kingdom with an arrogant demand for worship, promising miracles and good fortune to the royal family. Completely enthralled by the strange girl, Prince Filbert immediately gifted Celica a room within the royal palace. Convinced Celica was the legendary saintess who would restore the kingdom's glory, Filbert foolishly ignored his fiancée Minerva's warnings about harboring an uninvestigated stranger. Putting aside her own misgivings, Minerva dutifully accepted Filbert's request to become the mysterious girl's tutor. Minerva firmly insists that the accusations of her tormenting Celica are entirely false, as she only ever provided the girl with proper etiquette lessons. Despite Minerva doing everything possible to accommodate Celica's highly detailed living demands, the otherworldly girl proved to be incredibly lazy and demanding. Falsely playing the victim, Celica would cry to Filbert every single night, lying that Minerva was cruel and abusive to her behind closed doors. Minerva looks taken aback as Celica smiles warmly and prepares to explain what happened next. Wrapping an arm around Celica, Prince Filbert cruelly declares that he could never love a cold woman like Minerva, admitting he felt nothing for her during their entire engagement. Sitting quietly, Minerva vividly remembers how Filbert and Celica became lovers, resulting in her being cast out as a miserable eyesore. Believing she is no longer of any use to the family, a defeated Minerva suggests living quietly in a convent to avoid getting in the way. Her father immediately grabs her shoulders, fiercely promising to find his beloved daughter a nobleman who can truly make her happy. Her mother gently comforts her, lamenting that such a wonderful daughter lost everything to that otherworlder while holding firm to the belief that God sees all. She warmly reassures Minerva that she will inevitably be blessed with the happiness that is truly meant for her. Though showered with affection from her parents and 3 overprotective brothers, Minerva closes her eyes, entirely unable to picture herself receiving love from anyone else. Sometime later, Minerva nervously inspects a royal letter, bewildered as to why she would be invited to a palace tea party hosted by Celica of all times. As her maids adjust her elegant gown, a deep sense of dread washes over her while she wonders what the new princess consort could possibly be planning. A maid compliments her blooming beauty, prompting Minerva to steel her resolve and remember she must hold her head high as the daughter of a duke. Her 3 devoted brothers look on with deep concern, fully aware this will not be a wholesome tea party but knowing they cannot simply decline a royal summons. Approaching the grand palace in her carriage, Minerva silently bears the guilt that her ruined reputation reflects terribly on her brothers, especially since one used to be Prince Filbert's closest aide. Whispers circulate among the weary palace guards, revealing that the royal staff is far from thrilled a full year after Prince Filbert married that otherworlder. Stepping into the lavish halls she visited for 10 years as the future crown princess, Minerva is utterly shocked by how drastically her former second home has changed in a single year. Staring at the gaudy portraits hung everywhere, her brother mutters in disgust that Filbert has clearly granted Celica's every wish to turn the palace into their own tasteless little love nest. Entering the grand ballroom, the family is immediately met with the glittering sight of high society nobles sipping drinks and mingling beneath the massive chandeliers. The room erupts in vicious gasps as the bored aristocrats turn their attention to the infamous duke's daughter, mockingly whispering about how she just got dumped for a second time. Sitting arrogantly upon his throne at the top of the stairs, Prince Filbert watches with a mocking laugh while a blindfolded Celica stands proudly by his side. Ignoring the crushing weight of their stares, Minerva gracefully steps forward to face the royal couple. Lifting her beautiful skirt, she drops into a flawless and perfectly composed curtsy before the imposing throne. After exchanging hollow pleasantries, Celica steps forward, loudly announcing her desire to introduce a new friend to high society despite Minerva's exiled status. Minerva's eyes widen in sheer horror as Celica introduces her new friend, revealing the trembling maid Lily on the arm of a nervous Geoffrey Mortmain. Feigning deep emotion, Celica dramatically explains that she had Baron Lennox adopt Lily, entirely moved by her romance with Geoffrey and declaring it unfair that status should prevent true love. Leaning casually against his throne, Prince Filbert sneers down at Minerva, loudly mocking her supposed knack for ruining couples just like she allegedly tried to do with him and Celica. The scandalous narrative clicks into place as the crowd realizes the royals are spinning a false story, framing Minerva as a villain who failed to force Geoffrey into marriage by exploiting his love for a servant. Refusing to break character, Minerva icily congratulates the new Lady Lily, advising the former maid to seek a proper education now that she holds the title of Baroness. With devastating poise, Minerva points out that Lily and Celica have a lot in common, noting that neither of them originally knew how to properly live as nobility. Instantly dropping her sweet facade, an infuriated Celica screams that Minerva is just as rude as ever, foolishly arguing that all a marriage needs is love rather than fancy manners. A cruel voice rises from the crowd of snickering nobles, suggesting that the woman who was dumped twice should focus on fixing herself before daring to criticize others. Standing amidst the tasteless tea party, a crushing wave of dizzying humiliation crashes over Minerva as she realizes her scandal has become perfect entertainment for bored high society nobles. The malicious whispers close in from all sides, causing her protective brothers to lower their heads in trembling, barely contained fury. A spectator loudly proclaims that this is all just karma for her supposed attempts to ruin the beautiful relationships of both Filbert and Geoffrey. Unable to endure the agonizing disrespect any longer, her furious brother steps aggressively toward the stairs and barks at the smirking prince. Panic flashes through Minerva's eyes as she frantically looks at her brothers, desperately afraid they will commit treason to defend her honor. Breathing deeply, she anchors her shaking heart, reminding herself of the immense pressure of standing in front of all these merciless people. Summoning every ounce of her aristocratic pride, she silently vows not to flinch or cause a scene, holding her head high and remaining perfectly composed as a duke's daughter. Suddenly, the oppressive atmosphere shatters as panicked voices cry out, demanding to know why someone like him is here and if everyone has lost their minds. Commanding absolute authority just by stepping into the room, Prince Rufus, the Emperor's intimidating younger brother, makes a grand and shocking entrance. The entire ballroom freezes in awe and terror as a stammering Prince Filbert scrambles from his throne to nervously ask why his powerful uncle is here. Glaring at the lavish room around him, a dark-haired man demands to know why he was brought to such a tasteless gathering. Minerva recoils in sheer panic as she instantly recognizes the imposing man as Prince Rufus, the younger brother of the Greyling Empire's current emperor. Sweating profusely, Prince Filbert stares in dread and wonders why someone of such absolute high nobility would be present at their party. Flanked by his royal guards, Prince Rufus sweeps his cold, judgmental gaze across the terrified ballroom. Recognizing the absolute authority of the imperial prince, Minerva and her brothers immediately bow and curtsy in deep respect. Smirking slightly at Minerva's perfect etiquette, Rufus notes that there is at least one proper lady in attendance today. Rufus sharply orders a kneeling Filbert to get up, stating that seeing him slouch is nauseating, prompting the flustered prince to hastily apologize. Watching her tense brothers stand rigidly, Minerva admits to herself that she completely understands their overwhelming anxiety. She internally reflects that the Greyling Empire commands many vassal nations, including their own Asuran kingdom, making Prince Rufus a man far beyond their reach. Rufus coldly reveals he stopped by to make up for missing the royal wedding, only to find the prince had traded his crown for a brothel. Oblivious to the deadly danger, Celica glares at Rufus and demands to know who he thinks he is, accusing him of ruining the party's entire mood. Complaining that she worked hard to make the event fun, Celica's ignorance leaves the others terrified that she might lose her temper and put everyone in danger. Furious, Celica whines and stomps her foot, asking why this stranger has to ruin her special moment. Prince Rufus simply stares her down, his handsome features hardening into a lethal, icy glare. In a sudden, reckless burst of rage, Celica hurls her glass of red wine directly at the imperial prince. Moving with lightning speed, Minerva steps in front of Rufus and shields him, taking the splash of wine directly on her own dress while grabbing Celica's wrist. Holding the girl back, Minerva sternly reminds Celica that Asuran nobles only kneel before the Greyling imperial family, accusing her of endangering the entire kingdom with her ignorance. Playing the victim, Celica screams that Minerva grabbed her out of nowhere and is the real problem. Minerva fiercely reprimands the girl for treating a crown princess so disrespectfully, while Celica desperately points to her bruised wrist and claims Minerva splashed the wine on herself. The entire grand hall falls completely silent as the two women stand off before the imperial prince. Recognizing Rufus's famously cold reputation, Minerva sweats nervously while the prince asks Celica if she really thinks her pathetic excuse will work. A terrified Filbert realizes that the Greyling imperial family has full authority to punish any vassal who forgets their place, meaning a single drop of wine on Rufus could have meant doom. Realizing the intense gravity of the situation, Celica stammers in shock and confusion. Desperately trying to save herself, Celica begs Filbert to believe that Minerva deliberately hid information about suzerain states just to set her up and humiliate her. Suddenly, Minerva slips on the spilled wine, crying out in pain as she tumbles backward toward the hard floor. Her brothers scream her name in absolute horror as she falls. Catching her effortlessly, Prince Rufus notes that Minerva is much braver than she looks, remarking that this is the first time a woman has ever shielded him. Stunned by the close contact, Minerva can hardly believe that the imperial prince just protected her from the fall. Still cradled in his arms, Minerva hastily thanks his highness while a panicked Filbert watches in shock. Holding Minerva close, Rufus sharply tells Filbert that his wife seems to have a habit of throwing fits when things do not go her way. Trembling, Filbert denies seeing any such behavior, prompting a bystander to loudly question if Celica really thought the foreign lady was trying to disgrace Filbert's wife. Rufus steps forward protectively with Minerva, declaring that being from another world does not give a crown princess the right to plead ignorance and walk away unscathed. Sweating profusely, Filbert yields to Rufus's authority as the prince coldly reminds the couple they should be grateful Minerva intervened at all. Turning his attention back to the bewildered Minerva, Rufus calmly excuses himself from the escalating drama. Without warning, the imperial prince scoops a yelping Minerva up into an effortless bridal carry. Rufus correctly deduces that she likely sprained her ankle after slipping in the puddle of spilled wine. Addressing Minerva's bowing brother, Rufus orders the family to prepare a room and call a physician once the foolish royal couple finishes apologizing. As Filbert forcefully grabs a complaining Celica, Rufus shoots them a freezing glare and orders the girl to just kneel already. A frantic Filbert scolds Celica for almost causing a huge diplomatic incident, demanding she apologize immediately while she stares back in complete bewilderment. While Minerva's brothers look on with crossed arms, Celica continues to sob that she did not know anything, begging Filbert to hear her out as her pathetic excuses fall on deaf ears. Outraged at being ordered to bow, Celica shrieks in disbelief that she is being forced to submit in front of all her admirers. A stern prince coldly calls her pathetic after she petulantly refuses to follow their rules despite being from another world. Feeling the crushing weight of the situation, a frantic Filbert desperately begs Celica to just comply. Calling her a disgrace for lacking basic manners, Prince Rufus flatly rejects her half-hearted plea for forgiveness. He fiercely demands that she also apologize to Minerva, forcing a stammering Celica to finally choke out an apology. Humiliated in front of the entire court, Celica breaks down into loud, ugly sobs as she stutters out her regret. Unmoved by her display, Rufus furiously barks at her to stop crying, noting that her tears are just a cowardly attempt to avoid owning up to her mistakes. Tears stream down the crown princess's face as the stern prince glares down at her, completely disgusted by her lack of sincerity. Letting out a heavy sigh, Rufus declares her absolutely hopeless as Celica continues to wail uncontrollably. Prince Filbert obediently stammers his agreement while his uncle coldly commands him to explain this entire mess later. With the forced apology finally over, Rufus abruptly dismisses Filbert to carry his crying wife away and turns his attention to Minerva's injury. Despite Minerva insisting she can walk fine, the intimidating prince notes how her face twisted in pain earlier and refuses to let her impose on herself. Startled by his sudden proximity, Minerva nervously stammers that her brothers are present, but Rufus smoothly insists on repaying her for getting injured while protecting him. The prince commands the palace staff to prepare a change of clothes, summon a physician, and guide them to an empty room immediately. Entering the private room, an exhausted Minerva inwardly screams about the day's endless chaos before formally introducing herself to Prince Rufus Valentine Greyring. Before she can bow, Rufus stops her to apologize, but a frantic Minerva insists on taking the blame and deeply apologizes for the trouble she has caused. Seeing her distress, Rufus gently suggests that perhaps his intervention was unnecessary, noting that a capable woman like her could have likely avoided the shattered glass on her own. Minerva gazes up in quiet awe as the imposing prince looks down at her with a gentle, unexpected kindness. Stunned by his considerate actions, she recalls rumors that Prince Rufus actively avoids women and wonders why he went to such great lengths for her. Cutting through her thoughts, he bluntly asks if she thinks he is using this rescue as a cheap excuse to get closer to her. Startled by his directness, Minerva stammers that she didn't quite catch what he mumbled under his breath. Brushing it off, Rufus firmly asks permission to treat her injury, declaring that her actions have surprised him in the best possible way. Concluding that he is simply a man of strong principles, Minerva realizes she shouldn't offend him by refusing his earnest kindness. As she allows him to tend to her, she solemnly resolves to thank him properly, fully believing they will never cross paths again. 2 weeks later at the Bartnet ducal estate, her brothers heartily laugh while recalling the priceless, dumbfounded look on Filbert's face during that disastrous tea party. Her brothers confidently bet that the stern Prince Rufus had popped in unannounced to investigate, guaranteeing that word of Filbert's foolishness has reached the emperor. Discussing the prince's drastic change, they note that Filbert has become insufferable ever since Celica started filling his head with strange ideas about freedom from her world. They lament how Filbert, the only royal grandchild, used to be cheerful and loved the common people before Celica manipulated his endless doting into arrogance. As the men vent about how exhausting Filbert has become, one brother cheerfully suggests that it would be wonderful if the single Prince Rufus married Minerva. Blushing fiercely, Minerva immediately shoots down the ridiculous idea, firmly insisting that the prince was only kind to her out of pity and guilt. She humbly argues that Rufus must have heard about her broken engagement and scandalous reputation, leading him to simply feel bad for a ruined girl. Shaking her head to clear the sulking thoughts, Minerva confidently states that they will never see each other again anyway. Suddenly, a breathless servant bursts into the room, excitedly announcing that a carriage from the Grey Ring Empire has just arrived at their estate. A royal messenger steps forward, formally presenting an official letter from His Highness Prince Rufus directly to Lady Minerva. Staring at the massive stack of luxurious boxes, the family realizes this is far more than a simple apology, especially since the gifts are from Revigus, a famous imperial boutique. Her brothers excitedly recognize the high-end brand, recalling that it boasts an eccentric designer that Minerva has always deeply admired. Overwhelmed by curiosity, her family eagerly urges a stunned Minerva to go ahead and open the extravagant delivery. Lifting the pristine dress from its box, Minerva is left completely breathless by the exquisite, dreamlike beauty of the garment. Her family erupts in absolute awe, confidently declaring that she will outshine everyone in Grey Ring's high society while wearing such a stunning masterpiece. The room fills with joyous gasps as everyone marvels at the breathtaking gift, leaving Minerva utterly overwhelmed by the prince's grand gesture. Bursting into the room with excitement, Minerva's brothers announce that Prince Rufus will be visiting their estate in a week to make a personal request. Knowing her family desperately wants her to be happy, Minerva looks down somberly and doubts that life could ever be that convenient. Standing quietly in her room, she cynically reflects that heroes do not exist and that only shady men have approached her since her broken engagement. Staring out the window, Minerva suspects the imperial prince is only visiting to interrogate her about Filbert and Celica based on her unique past position. On the day of the highly anticipated visit, enthusiastic maids prepare a nervous Minerva, insisting she wear stunning makeup and leave her hair down. Checking her reflection, Minerva tries to reassure herself that she looks elegant enough just as a maid announces the prince's arrival. Minerva is completely taken aback when Rufus greets her by presenting a massive, beautiful bouquet of red roses. Gathering her composure as a proper duke's daughter, she executes a perfect curtsy and formally welcomes His Highness to their estate. Rufus apologizes for his initial silence, confessing he was momentarily struck speechless by her beauty before politely asking to call her by her first name. Sitting together, Rufus checks on her previously sprained ankle and admits he has been thinking of her ever since that chaotic party. Observing his earnest expression, Minerva internally deduces that the rumors of his strong sense of duty are true and he must simply be feeling guilty. She bows her head and apologizes for worrying him, silently surprised by how remarkably real his sincerity feels. Flustered by his generous floral gift, Minerva panics internally when Rufus gently insists she drop the formalities and just call him by his name. A tense, quiet moment passes between them as the prince stares at her expectantly. Blushing softly, Minerva finally gives in and calls him Rufus, bringing a warm, satisfied smile to his face. Intervening with a loud cough, her father suggests they move to the garden gazebo, eager to brag to the prince about his champion racing horses. Sipping tea in the sunlight, Minerva realizes Rufus has not asked a single question about the royal scandal, making her wonder if he truly just came to apologize. Looking at his gentle, relaxed smile, Minerva finds it absolutely impossible to believe the rumors claiming the prince is cold and dislikes women. Duke Bartnet loudly praises his daughter as a capable and remarkable woman, clearly fishing for a royal proposal while Minerva sweats nervously. Rufus warmly agrees with the Duke, praising Minerva's bravery and unwavering composure during the violent tea party incident. Taking her hand tenderly, Rufus confesses that he fell for her the moment she shielded him and declares it would be an honor to make her his wife. Minerva immediately pales in shock, asking if His Highness is feeling unwell as she struggles to process the sudden proposal. Gripped by the lingering trauma of her past, Minerva remembers that her previous treacherous fiancés also seemed perfectly sincere at first. Withdrawing slightly, Minerva bluntly states she cannot believe he would fall for a disgraced woman and demands he be upfront if he harbors any ill intent. Duke Bartnet gasps in absolute horror at his daughter's accusation, sharply reprimanding her for disrespecting the imperial prince. Covering her mouth in sheer panic, Minerva suddenly realizes she just practically called His Highness a liar to his face. Fearing his absolute wrath, Minerva jolts in terror as Rufus quietly and seriously acknowledges her defensive words. Rubbing his temple, Rufus sighs heavily, realizing her trauma runs much deeper than he initially expected. Trembling in her seat, Minerva frantically tries to pull herself together to apologize before she completely disgraces her family. Reaching out, Rufus gently takes her trembling hand once again and softly asks for her forgiveness. Gazing into her wide, fearful eyes, Rufus admits it is entirely natural for her to be terrified of his intentions after surviving 2 incredibly painful romantic betrayals. The prince confesses he never learned how to get close to others, recognizing that her high status taught her to distrust people who only want to use her. Acknowledging that some wounds never fully heal, Rufus earnestly asks for the chance to help ease her pain and support her in stepping forward into a new life. Tears immediately prick Minerva's eyes as she is profoundly moved by the deep, genuine comfort radiating from the bottom of his heart. Crying openly, Minerva expresses her immense gratitude for his kindness and tearfully apologizes for the awful accusations she just made. Smiling gently, Rufus tells her not to apologize, claiming her cautious heart only made him admire her more. Minerva and Rufus share a tender, quiet moment of mutual understanding as the emotional weight of the afternoon settles gracefully around them. Watching from the balcony, her brothers smile in relief as Minerva finally feels her world light up with brilliant hope for the first time. Later inside the estate, Colin gently teases Minerva about finally crying, admitting her constant rationality had started to genuinely worry them. Leaning against the balcony, Minerva expresses her lingering doubts about ruining Rufus's reputation, prompting Colin to sigh that she is overthinking her worthiness again. Reassuring her value, Justin gently tells Minerva she is worth more than she thinks if she truly wants to stand by the prince's side. Her eyes widen as she is urged not to lose to the ladies of Greyring, but rather to learn and practice more. Justin smiles warmly, noting the old Minerva is coming back and promising their family's full support if she chooses Prince Rufus. He advises her to simply rest for today since the prince is not rushing her for an answer. Thinking back to Prince Rufus, Minerva admits she wants to know more about him and is starting to believe in his genuine kindness. Gazing fondly into the distance, she decides she just wants to hold on to this hopeful feeling for now. Reaching for a book from the towering shelves, she resolves that she first needs to gather strength and knowledge. Bathed in the warm glow of a desk lamp, Minerva sits quietly in the grand library, completely absorbed in her studies. Meanwhile, an infuriated Prince Filbert sits alone in his palace, cursing bitterly and refusing to let things end like this. Cutting back to the present, Marcus praises Minerva for her excellent riding, advising her not to overdo it as they ride through the forest. Minerva solemnly reflects that she has barely left the house or ridden a horse in over a year since Celica arrived and Filbert broke their engagement. She notes that the chaos at Celica's tea party brought an unexpected meeting with Prince Rufus just after Geoffrey betrayed her a second time. Riding alongside her, Marcus suddenly tells Minerva to slow down a bit so Colin can catch up. Colin quickly rides up on his horse, confirming to an anxious Minerva that something has happened. Colin urgently reports that Prince Filbert just showed up out of nowhere on horseback to speak with Justin, specifically demanding to talk to Minerva. Minerva sighs and decides to get it over with quickly, confirming with Colin that Celica is not traveling with the prince's small group. She remembers Prince Rufus giving her a messenger bird named Halm, realizing she might need to use it depending on what Filbert wants. Prince Filbert confidently approaches the group on horseback, looking down at them with a stern expression. Filbert immediately insults Minerva, arrogantly claiming that a noblewoman riding horses like that is disgraceful in their suzerain state of Greyring. Minerva fires back that Assuran takes pride in its own traditions, reminding him that Greyring only treats them generously because their grandparents reigned longer than anyone else. A smirking Filbert notices her stylish new riding gear and correctly guesses that Prince Rufus sent it as a get-well gift. Filbert angrily accuses Minerva of making things worse and humiliating them further, insisting that Celica never meant to throw wine at Prince Rufus. Coughing awkwardly to regain his composure, Filbert dismisses the incident and declares that his reason for coming today is to restore her place in high society. Unimpressed, Minerva glares at him from the ground, bluntly stating she understands his true reason while he demands to know why she looks unhappy. She ruthlessly points out that multiple tutors quit educating Celica within days after their majesties scolded him, leaving no one else who wants the job. Staring him down with absolute defiance, Minerva boldly asks if he truly thinks he still has the luxury of being picky. Filbert furiously calls her rude and lacking in judgment, but Minerva shoots back that she has warned him many times about being too lenient with Celica. She firmly declares she is done helping Lady Celica, reminding Filbert that he let her awful behavior slide for a full year and is now simply facing the consequences. Filbert glares down at her, his eyes trembling with desperate, unhinged rage. He screams at her for disrespecting royalty, frantically insisting that Celica's blessings are real and that miracles have been confirmed at the descent site. Gripping his reins tightly, he snarls that she owes her elite education entirely to their grandparents' legacy. Filbert violently demands that she use her knowledge to serve her country, screaming that it is her absolute duty. Justin calmly steps in front of his sister, firmly asking Prince Filbert to leave immediately. Glaring with absolute disgust, Justin threatens that he cannot guarantee what they will do if Filbert insults his sister any further. Filbert seethes in frustrated silence, thoroughly outnumbered by the fierce and highly protective Bartnet brothers. Turning his horse away, a bitter Filbert warns Minerva that she will regret this. Marcus proudly praises Minerva for shutting him down exactly like Prince Rufus would have, though she worries Filbert might come back for revenge. Minerva solemnly reflects that forcing Celica to behave is basically a death sentence, noting the hypocrisy of Filbert tearing apart the traditions he claims to be proud of. Sensing the lingering danger, Justin urges the group to get moving to a safe place before Filbert can try something worse. Colin agrees to return to the estate with Justin to contact Prince Rufus, instructing Marcus to take Minerva and leave the area immediately. Confirming their destination, someone notes that the Greyring Embassy is the only place inside Ashuran that operates entirely outside the kingdom's jurisdiction. Recalling a past conversation, Minerva remembers Prince Rufus warmly urging her to rely on him and take refuge at the embassy if anything ever threatened her safety. Arriving safely at their destination, Marcus and Minerva are formally welcomed into the grand halls of the Greyring Empire Embassy. Expressing his deep gratitude for their protection, Marcus is greeted by Nicholas Finch, who introduces himself as the special envoy and ambassador. Nicholas then introduces the man assigned to guard them, who immediately compliments Minerva's incredible beauty, noting that Prince Rufus had not exaggerated at all. Recognizing him as the striking, heterochromic man who accompanied Rufus earlier, Minerva formally meets Roan Astley, a uniquely skilled guard serving both the prince and the ambassador. Excusing himself to return to work, Nicholas politely asks Roan to escort Minerva to her prepared quarters where fresh clothes await the entire Bartnet family. Escorted to her room, Minerva invites a flustered Roan to drop the formalities and join her for some tea and an abundance of sweets. Apologizing for interrupting his duties, Minerva admits she wants to ask him about serving such an exceptional prince at a young age, prompting Roan to cite his strict duty as her escort. Laughing brightly, Roan ultimately yields to the temptation, assuring her he can guard her just fine indoors while boasting about his massive appetite. Sitting before a towering array of luxurious pastries, the young guard claps his hands together in absolute delight. Watching Roan enjoy the feast, Minerva notes his boyish charm while confirming that Prince Rufus personally selected the beautiful dress she is currently wearing. Realizing that Rufus's famously cold reputation contradicts his gentle actions toward her, Minerva listens as Roan explains that the prince has never let any woman into his heart before. With a knowing smile, Roan acknowledges her confusion, explaining that the notoriously icy Shadow Prince is usually entirely unapproachable to women. Staring at her earnestly, Roan declares that Minerva is truly special because she is the only one who has ever managed to melt the defensive walls around Rufus's heart. Closing his eyes with a fond smile, Roan shares that he will never forget the look on the prince's face that day, as the proposal meant absolutely everything to him. Catching himself before he reveals too much, Roan chuckles and decides he probably should not say anything else on the matter. Looking at the pensive noblewoman, Roan confidently assures Minerva that Prince Rufus is coming straight for her and will surely explain everything himself someday. Smiling warmly, Minerva thanks Roan for his comfort and admits that Rufus's kindness has finally given her the courage to trust again, fully intending to accept his proposal upon his return. Winking playfully, Roan praises his master as a noble soul without any scandalous thoughts, promising Minerva that she will never regret her choice. Shifting the conversation, Roan reveals that the prince has already left the capital and is pushing his horses so hard that he might arrive as early as tomorrow night. Taking the absolute fastest route possible, Prince Rufus drives himself and his steed to the brink of exhaustion just to reach her. Bursting through the doors much earlier than anticipated, a breathless Prince Rufus finally arrives. Realizing he must have traveled entirely without rest, Minerva stares in awe as the exhausted prince immediately apologizes for keeping her waiting. Moving into a formal meeting, Nicholas apologizes for relocating the Bartnet family so suddenly, explaining that they brought Minerva to the embassy for her own safety after she reported an assault by Crown Prince Filbert. Rufus sternly declares that Minerva's safety is his absolute top priority, and that he fully intends to investigate the Ashuran royal family's highly suspicious behavior next. Caught completely off guard by the sheer scale of his protective measures, Minerva gasps in surprise. Gathering everyone together in a private lounge, Nicholas announces they have two primary topics to discuss regarding Minerva's safety and the royal family's suspicious movements. Taking a seat beside Minerva, a serious Rufus decides they must begin by addressing the matter of her immediate protection. Nicholas officially confirms that as of yesterday, Lady Minerva and her entire family have been placed under the absolute protection of the Grey Ring Embassy. Revealing that the Ashuran royal palace reached out that very morning, Nicholas explains that the embassy formally responded by citing human rights violations as their justification for sheltering Minerva. Smirking confidently, Nicholas outlines their true goal of keeping the crown prince away from the palace, instructing his staff to greet any royal representatives politely when the time inevitably comes. Pivoting to the second issue, Nicholas questions Justin about Crown Prince Filbert's childhood habits, confirming that the royal was previously known for being unable to sit still. Pointing out a glaring inconsistency, Justin notes that Filbert has not left the palace for extended periods since marrying Celica, dismissing the idea that the prince is simply nursing his sick parents. Deepening the investigation, Rufus turns to Minerva and asks about the king and queen's health prior to Celica's arrival, to which Minerva confirms they were perfectly healthy. Minerva further explains that the royal couple was initially quite upset that an unknown commoner had been brought into their sacred home. However, she recalls that the royals' health rapidly deteriorated shortly after, suspiciously coinciding with their sudden, public endorsement of the otherworldly girl. Putting the sinister pieces together, Rufus suggests the horrifying possibility that Filbert is deliberately using Celica's power to weaken the king and queen, explaining his absolute refusal to leave the palace. The men openly question if Celica truly possesses such saintly power, noting that she has yet to produce a single visible miracle since her arrival. Pushing his glasses up, Nicholas states that his thorough background check confirms her items are genuinely from another world, as her erratic behavior aligns perfectly with known otherworldly traits. Filbert cheerfully claims there are verified miracles at the descent site, but Minerva notes the suspicious reality, having discovered that Celica disguises herself as a commoner to visit the site several times a month. Concluding Celica might be wielding a frightening power, Prince Rufus commands them to summon the crown prince to the embassy so they can investigate Minerva's case while finding out what changed the king and queen. Rufus outlines their second objective, planning to take medical experts and head straight to the king and queen themselves while Filbert is distracted. Justin firmly agrees, declaring they will be fully prepared when they go in. Sitting quietly on the sofa, a troubled Minerva listens in solemn silence. She reminisces about the admirable king and queen, recalling how a warm and dignified Queen Olivia taught her the names of the stars to prepare her for royalty while wondering if the queen only accepted Celica out of overwhelming love for Filbert. Rufus gently advises the rest of the group to take it easy for now, noting that he and Nicholas still have some planning to do. Craving a late-night snack but unwilling to wake the cooks, the group enthusiastically sets up an outdoor bonfire and barbecue. The boys cheerfully grill food and suggest roasting biscuits and marshmallows, wondering if they should set up a second grill for the unexpected crowd. Roan calls Minerva over as a concerned Prince Rufus approaches, playfully noting she really doesn't know how to take a break. Presenting a massive mountain of food on a platter, Roan cheerfully urges His Highness to enjoy the feast on the bench with Lady Minerva. The courtyard fills with bright laughter as the group happily enjoys their lively, impromptu barbecue under the night sky. Sitting together on the bench, Rufus reveals he found a 15-year-old Roan wandering the streets, noting that despite his cheerful demeanor he has been through a lot. Rufus explains that people assumed Roan was an otherworlder due to his appearance, leaving him persecuted and shivering in the alleys before Rufus recognized his incredible potential and took him in. Minerva watches Roan fondly, acknowledging how far he has come despite his suffering and constant worry for her. Leaning forward slightly, Rufus gently asks if Roan already told her that he has lived his life with walls built around his heart. Minerva nods quietly as Rufus asks if he can share something from his own past with her. Rufus recounts how he knew his parents loved him but felt guilty because their entire focus was on his frail, sickly older brother, the heir to the mighty Grey Ring Empire. He reveals that greedy nobles constantly surrounded him with dirty ambitions, knowing he would become the heir if his sickly brother died. The young Rufus stood isolated among plotting aristocrats, forbidden from seeking affection because anyone who approached him only desired his immense status and wealth. Pointing to himself, Rufus explains that his parents restricted his freedom to cope with the overwhelming swarm of people drawn to his unstable position. He walked a lonely path of strict obedience, knowing he couldn't afford to slip up and was forbidden to love until his brother's rule was entirely secure. Looking down with a somber expression, Rufus admits to a sympathetic Minerva that his isolation simply couldn't be helped. Standing tall in his imposing uniform, Rufus explains that he completely closed himself off, pushing away clinging noble ladies and wearing only black so he wouldn't outshine his brother. Everything changed when his brother regained his health, married for love, and took the throne, graciously ordering Rufus to remove his armor and live his own life. Minerva listens with a sorrowful gaze as Rufus confesses he had grown so used to his isolated life that he thought he would never find someone to open up to. A deeply moved Minerva thanks him for sharing his and Roan's stories, wishing she could have been there for the fragile young boy hidden beneath the stoic prince. Turning toward her with a warm, genuine smile, Rufus softly notes that life sometimes takes unexpected turns. He tenderly confesses that she showed him a new world, proving he hadn't lost his ability to love but had simply fallen in love at first sight. Rufus vows to stop anything that ever threatens her, recalling how satisfying it was to hear she stood up to Filbert before running to the embassy. Acknowledging her strength, the prince firmly declares he still intends to make Filbert pay for everything he put her through. Shifting the mood, Rufus formally states there is something important concerning the future that he must ask her. Minerva gazes up at him in wide-eyed anticipation as he turns to face her completely under the falling snow. The prince drops gracefully to one knee, asking for permission to repeat his earlier declaration. Swearing on his honor to make her happy no matter what, Rufus earnestly asks Minerva to marry him. Acknowledging it has only been a month since they met, he gently reassures her that he understands how scary such a life-changing decision can be. He presses forward, urgently explaining that he needs her answer now to ensure her safety. Apologizing for rushing her healing heart, Rufus admits he wanted to give her more time to be sure his feelings were entirely real. Kneeling before her, he insists that becoming his fiancée will prevent Filbert and the others from touching her easily, practically begging her to use him for her own safety. An overwhelmed Minerva desperately stammers for him to stop, insisting with tears in her eyes that using him is not what this is about at all. Minerva is crying, overwhelmed with emotion, desperately wanting to say yes to his proposal and be with him but struggling to find the right words. Gripping her hands tightly, she realizes how difficult it is to open up to someone she cares about, determined not to make Rufus look sad as he watches her patiently. Looking up at him with a warm, tearful smile, she decides to honestly share her feelings and the answer she already knows deep down. The two of them sit quietly together on a garden bench as the wind gently rustles the bushes around them. Apologizing for starting so far back, Minerva explains that being chosen as the future crown princess at age 7 meant she never had a chance to experience or even wonder about love. She recalls her very first meeting with Prince Filbert, who coldly greeted her by insulting her stiff, uptight expression. Listening intently, Rufus remarks that he would love to go back in time and punch Filbert for treating her that way. She reveals the painful reality that Filbert only chose her to quietly tolerate his flaws, meaning she constantly had to endure his bruised ego despite studying tirelessly to be a perfect princess. Even after Celica arrived, Minerva still held onto the hope that she and Filbert could slowly build a real bond through their shared dreams and laughter. Her expression darkening, she remembers the unspeakable humiliation of being demoted to Celica's tutor after her engagement was annulled, forcing herself to stay calm simply because she did not want bitterness to consume her. Although she maintained a stoic facade, inside she was a raging storm, just seconds away from completely breaking down and crying over the sheer cruelty of the situation. After being exiled and wasting 11 years of her life, she told herself she would never cry over them again, holding back her tears for so long that she completely forgot how to cry. Gazing deeply into Rufus's eyes, she confesses that meeting him made her wonder if enduring all that painful training was simply meant to prepare her to shield him that day. Blushing softly, she admits that his gentle, sincere proposal finally cleared her mind of painful memories and filled her with overwhelming happiness. Holding back her joyful tears, Minerva enthusiastically accepts his proposal, declaring that she has fallen in love for the very first time in her life. Touched by her heartfelt confession, a blushing Rufus covers his mouth and jokes that she is trying to make him cry too. Clutching her pounding chest, Minerva smiles radiantly, realizing that the beautiful feeling of love is giving her the strength to finally overcome her lifelong fears. Rufus smiles back gently, assuring her that there is absolutely nothing left to worry about now. He firmly promises to stay by her side and protect her forever, his lingering doubts entirely erased by her honest confession. Beaming with renewed confidence, Minerva suggests they go inside and share the wonderful news with her family. The imposing, beautiful exterior of the Bartnet estate stands quietly under the evening sky. Inside, Rufus proudly holds Minerva's hand in a grand room filled with flowers, while her parents watch in sheer astonishment. With a confident smirk, Rufus officially announces their engagement to the stunned family, vowing to make Minerva the happiest woman alive. Overwhelmed with immense gratitude, her parents deeply bow to the prince and thank him for saving their daughter from society's cruel judgment during her darkest hour. Watching their daughter glow with genuine happiness, her parents internally rejoice that she can finally smile again. Turning his attention to Minerva's brothers, Rufus playfully warns Justin, Marcus, and Colin to prepare to work themselves to the bone as his future brothers-in-law. The three brothers eagerly accept the challenge, loudly pledging to serve His Highness with all their hearts and skip sleep entirely if it means clearing a path for the happy couple. A joyful Minerva reflects that Rufus has given her brothers a new purpose, trusting they will rise to the occasion after her broken engagement initially crushed their futures. Entering the room, a smiling Nicholas Finch and Rowan Astley congratulate the couple, noting how incredibly rare it is to see the notoriously stoic prince express such radiant joy. Interrupting the sweet moment, Nicholas seriously informs the group that they just received a critical report regarding Celica's movements. With Filbert heading to the embassy to demand Minerva's return and Celica also absent from the palace, Rufus realizes this is their only chance to investigate the royal couple. As they prepare to move out, Rowan reveals that Otherworlders are not the only ones with special powers, as he is one of the rare individuals in this world who possesses unique abilities. Minerva listens in awe as Rufus explains that Rowan's unique power can effectively counter whatever magic Celica might be using to control the king and queen. Remembering the ominous shadows surrounding the ailing monarchs, Minerva worries about the terrifying extent of otherworldly abilities. Clasping her hands together in prayer, she hopes the king and queen are still safe, wishing she could do more to help them. A sudden, shocking image of the grand royal palace flashes through her mind as she imagines the incapacitated monarchs trapped in their beds. Snapping out of her fearful thoughts, she turns to find Nicholas announcing that the horses are ready for their urgent departure. Moving with swift determination, the group mounts their horses and rides out into the night. Looking ahead with a resolute expression, Minerva realizes her broken engagement might be part of a much larger conspiracy, determined to uncover the truth no matter what. With Filbert lured to the embassy and Celica away at the descent site, the group races toward the palace to finally reach the isolated king and queen. Panicked guards frantically yell to open the gates as a royal procession approaches. Riding at the head of a grand procession, Prince Rufus Valentine Greyring arrives at the palace and demands an audience with their majesties. The massive palace doors swing open, leaving the royal staff and maids gasping in sheer shock. Striding inside with absolute authority, Prince Rufus is met by a stammering official who nervously welcomes him to the estate. Rufus immediately demands to see King Keenan and Queen Olivia, but the sweating official hesitates and claims he can only take a message since their health is failing. Rowan smoothly interjects that the former emperor sent physicians, prompting the terrified official to reveal that Crown Prince Filbert ordered all visitors be completely refused. Leaning in with an intimidating glare, Rufus coldly assures the trembling steward that he won't be punished for letting them in. Glancing up at the stairs, the steward trembles in fear upon spotting Minerva and her brothers, bewildered as to why the alleged traitors are accompanying the prince. The surrounding maids and guards exchange shocked whispers, completely bewildered by the presence of a woman accused of a broken engagement and treason. Taking Minerva's hand with absolute devotion, Rufus loudly commands the hall's attention and declares that her family are not the traitors Filbert claims them to be. He fiercely commands that no one in Assuran ever demean Minerva again, proudly announcing their solemn vow of engagement and her newly elevated royal standing. Glaring fiercely at the utterly stunned crowd, Rufus vows that anyone who dares to insult his fiancée will answer directly to him. The sheer, terrifying weight of his authority forces the entire palace staff to instantly drop to their knees in submission. Standing firmly as Minerva's shield, Rufus smoothly adds that a royal decree will handle this situation soon and confirms the vicious rumors about her are entirely baseless. Standing behind the couple, Minerva's brother scoffs that Filbert's audacity to call her a traitor is completely incomprehensible. Glancing back at the fierce Bartnet brothers, Rufus notes that many of their old friends happen to be at the palace today. Roan smoothly suggests that a small party should visit the king and queen while the brothers use this opportunity to rebuild their neglected network. Stepping up with a massive grin, Marcus cheerfully agrees to guide Rufus's men around while loudly demanding the entire palace mobilize for the future consort. Sweating nervously, the staff scatters to spread the massive news during the monthly assembly, perfectly playing into Rufus's master plan to exploit Filbert's absence. The terrified steward stares in complete shock as a perfectly composed Minerva steps forward to address him. Acknowledging his exhaustion from nursing the royals, Minerva gently points out that the shaking steward had no choice but to obey Filbert's terrifying orders. She kindly forgives his earlier hesitation, entirely understanding that he was just trying to remain loyal to their majesties amidst a storm of baseless rumors. Smiling warmly alongside a confident Rufus, Minerva reassures the crying steward that he can rely on them now and begs him to let them inside. Overcome with overwhelming relief, the sobbing steward deeply apologizes to Minerva for completely misjudging her character. He tearfully confesses his utter despair over being potentially cast out by Filbert, sincerely begging forgiveness for his groundless accusations. Rufus steps forward and confidently takes Minerva's hand, firmly assuring the weeping steward that there is absolutely nothing left to fear. In a dazzling display of pure affection, the prince gracefully bows and kisses Minerva's hand right in front of the stunned onlookers. Gazing deeply into her eyes, Rufus proudly declares his extraordinary fortune to wed a woman as beautiful and keen as his remarkable fiancée. The surrounding maids erupt in jealous, swooning squeals as a fiercely blushing Minerva frantically begs Rufus to tuck his devastating smile away. Smiling smoothly, Rufus instructs the staff to spread the word about their massive upcoming wedding before turning to ask his love if they should proceed. Minerva confidently realizes their investigation will proceed perfectly, knowing that nobles eager to ally with Grey Ring won't dare snub her brothers or Rufus's men. Walking down the grand halls, Rufus asks Anton about the royal couple's condition, learning their bodies live but their minds are fading from an unknown cause. Anton frantically reveals they both seized at the exact same time, prompting an attentive Roan to ask when the earliest symptoms actually began. A grim realization washes over Minerva and Rufus as Anton confirms the symptoms started about a week before Filbert broke his engagement. Anton solemnly explains that the royal couple now spends almost the entire day drifting in and out, completely sealed within their own clouded minds. Roan sharply asks when the royals were last fully clear-minded, and Anton recalls it was the day His Highness visited right before the disgraceful tea party. Anton vividly recounts the terrible fight Filbert had with their majesties that night, describing how a drained King Keenan wrote a desperate letter to Grey Ring with trembling hands. A serious Minerva asks if the crown princess still visits the East Wing, learning that Celica only stops by briefly a few times a month without ever actually nursing them. Smiling brightly to ease the tension, Roan genuinely thanks the steward for providing all the critical information they needed. Gesturing forward, Anton finally leads the solemn group to the massive, imposing doors of their majesties' private chambers. Gripping a glowing orb, Roan senses the distinct hostility and powerful force of an otherworld. The group gasps in realization as they connect the king and queen's deteriorating condition directly to Lady Celica. Rufus solemnly explains that while otherworlders are often praised for bringing miracles, their immense power does not always bring blessings. Holding up his spirit-charged catalyst, Roan declares that such items are absolutely essential to counter dangerous otherworldly beings. Prince Rufus and his entourage stride purposefully into the grand royal bedroom to check on the incapacitated monarchs. Lying pale and motionless in their lavish bed, Lord Keenan and Lady Olivia appear alarmingly close to death. Covering her mouth in sheer horror, Minerva trembles as she realizes the royal couple has been hit incredibly hard by the magical affliction. An attendant formally introduces Prince Rufus and Minerva, proudly noting she is soon to be the consort of the Emperor's brother. Roan grimly assesses that ordinary physicians could never perceive this otherworldly power, making the year-long magical weakening look like a natural decline. Gathering his energy, an angry Roan vows to purify the curse, refusing to stand by while an otherworlder endangers the people of this world. He glares intensely, expressing his deep, burning hatred for arrogant individuals who think their divine blessings make them omnipotent. Without warning, dark and suffocating mana violently erupts from the mouths of the unconscious royal couple. Moving with lightning speed, Rufus orders Roan to step back while he rapidly casts a powerful protective barrier. Unleashing a massive burst of magical energy, the prince completely shields the weakened monarchs from the volatile dark mana. Turning back to a startled Minerva, Rufus calmly explains that he used a jade catalyst to raise the quick barrier. Minerva stares in absolute awe, completely amazed that Lord Rufus possesses a special ability of his own while worrying about the lingering curse. The royal attendants gasp in utter shock as the king and queen suddenly jolt and begin to stir from their magical coma. Stepping forward to calm the panicked room, Minerva gently explains that the royals will remain hazy for a while as their consciousness gradually returns. Utterly exhausted from the intense magical exertion, Rufus and Roan collapse onto a nearby sofa to take a desperate break. Catching his breath, Rufus reveals to a curious Minerva that he awakened his barrier ability as a child out of a desperate need to protect himself. He acknowledges the brutal fatigue of his magic, explaining that otherworldly attacks hit much harder because they possess divine backing. Smiling proudly, Roan adds that special abilities do exist in this world, which is exactly why Rufus actively seeks out and trains rare talents like him. Suddenly, Roan's magical orb cracks under the lingering pressure, prompting Rufus to declare they must prioritize finding a stronger catalyst. With the immediate danger past, Rufus seriously states that they must track down the physical source of Celica's curse after taking a short rest. Recognizing her usual habits, they deduce that Celica likely brought cursed objects into the palace and hid them somewhere in the East Wing. Sighing heavily, Roan groans that searching the massive East Wing will be completely exhausting since she would never use an obvious hiding spot. Stepping forward with renewed determination, Minerva recalls exploring hidden passageways and offers her keen observational skills. Her eyes narrowing sharply, she suspects her main role in the conspiracy was merely to act as bait to draw Prince Filbert away from the palace. Refusing to be sidelined, Minerva bravely tells Rufus that she might be able to help with the physical search if there is even a slight chance of success. While enjoying a quick tea break, Rufus analyzes the intel, noting that Celica cursing the royals and escaping the palace is a fatal blow to her grand plan. He realizes that Filbert likely refused to leave the palace simply because he needed to keep a paranoid, constant watch on the hidden curse sources. The group concludes that Filbert's desperate attempt to force a marriage just to place Celica right next to their majesties crossed a massive line. Staring out at the imposing palace architecture, they acknowledge that finding the hidden curses in the massive East Wing will be incredibly tough but absolutely necessary. Turning his attention back to Minerva, an intrigued Roan asks how exactly she plans to help with such a physically daunting search. Minerva explains that since childhood, she has possessed an uncanny knack for finding hidden things, whether it be her brothers during hide-and-seek or a lost watch. She reveals that this exact talent recently allowed her to discover a secret passage and catch Lily and Jeffrey meeting in secret. Smiling brightly, she admits she kept the talent hidden from the public because people might think her weird for being so unnaturally observant. Astonished by her revelation, Roan drops his pastry and excitedly suggests she might actually possess the incredibly rare magical gift of clairvoyance. Downplaying it as just a simple trick, Minerva confidently tells Roan to hide a few chess pieces so she can directly demonstrate her power. Sitting calmly in the center of the room with her eyes closed, Minerva unleashes a wave of sensory power to locate the hidden objects. Searching the room, a focused Prince Rufus quickly uncovers items hidden in a basket, behind an ivory photo frame, and inside a silver trinket box. Minerva eagerly reveals another hidden item inside a sugar jar, explaining that an unexplainable sensation pulls her toward the objects whenever she focuses her mind. Recognizing her incredible potential, Rufus excitedly declares that Minerva possesses the rare gift of clairvoyance, comparing it to Roan's purification and his own barrier abilities. Thinking back to when she first saw Rufus raise a magical barrier, Minerva recalls feeling a sharp sting of isolation, believing his world was entirely out of her reach. Resolving to finally assist him, Minerva bravely offers to search for whatever Celica has hidden, but a panicked Roan abruptly shouts for her to stop. Warning that Celica's magic is deeply evil, Roan insists she needs a proper trigger that will not only boost her clairvoyance but also shield her from dark energy. Roan suggests using topaz to enhance her searching abilities, prompting him to ask Prince Rufus which of Queen Olivia's abundant jewels would serve as the best catalyst. Clearing his throat nervously, Rufus silences Roan's eager suggestions as Minerva happily realizes that topaz happens to be her birthstone. Reaching into his coat, a blushing Rufus pulls out an exquisite ring box and admits he had originally planned to give it to her once the chaos settled. He gently presents the dazzling topaz ring, believing it is the perfect artifact to awaken her inner power and shield her from Celica's dark magic. Gazing at the breathtaking jewel, a stunned Minerva listens as Rufus reveals it is a precious Grayling family heirloom passed down through generations. Pouring his heart out, the prince tenderly declares the cherished heirloom is a pledge of his enduring love and a solemn promise to always protect the woman who warmed his lonely life. Overwhelmed by his absolute devotion, Minerva blushes deeply as Rufus gently slides the precious ring onto her finger, sending a surge of warmth straight through her heart. Rufus promises to propose properly once the crisis ends, prompting Roan to cheer wildly while the prince refocuses their attention on the urgent mission ahead. The determined group stands united in the grand chamber, fully prepared to confront the lingering darkness within the palace walls. Taking her hands gently, Rufus instructs Minerva to connect with the nature-born Topaz so they can finally draw out her clairvoyance and hunt down the cursed objects. Wrapping his arms protectively around her shoulders, Rufus holds her close so she can relax as she nervously asks how to activate the stone's power. Assuring her they are a team whose combined strengths rival any otherworlder, Rufus tells her to seek out the same ink-black mana signature that Roan previously pulled from Celica. He softly instructs her to focus deeply on the ring, revealing he has bound it with a single wish to protect her alongside the spirits of his mother and grandmother. Anchored by the comforting warmth of Rufus's embrace, Minerva closes her eyes and fiercely projects her mind to clear the world of Celica's lingering threats. Her consciousness violently launches out of her body, allowing her to soar through the palace walls as her newly amplified senses easily sweep across the estate. Gliding effortlessly through the bustling corridors, she observes the lively maids spreading joyful news of the royal recovery, marveling at her ability to perceive the unseen. Suddenly, a foul, oozing aura catches her attention, drawing her sharp focus straight toward a dark energy radiating from a nearby shelf. Snapping back to reality, an exhausted Minerva quickly reports that the first cursed item is hidden behind the rightmost shelf in the linen room. Having perfectly tuned into Celica's vile wavelength, Minerva rapidly pinpoints the remaining sources, finding curses hidden in the queen's library and tucked inside a poetry book in the mail room. Staring intently at the glowing ring, she confidently declares that uncovering all these hidden traps will completely sever Celica's sinister scheme. Without warning, the magical ring violently crackles with surging electricity as an overwhelming new vision forcefully grabs hold of her mind. Her clairvoyant spirit is instantly dragged high into the sky, leaving her utterly shocked as her vision shoots far beyond the boundaries of the royal palace. Gripping her trembling body, a deeply concerned Rufus asks where her mind is drifting, fearing that Celica's dark influence has already infected lands far beyond their reach. Streaking across the open sky like a comet, Minerva's projected consciousness races rapidly over the sprawling capital city. Flying rapidly over a massive forest lake, a bewildered Minerva desperately asks the glowing Topaz what terrible secret it is trying to reveal. Refusing to hesitate for even a second, she pushes her amplified senses to the absolute limit, determined to uncover whatever lingering malice still plagues their world. Reassured by the physical warmth of Rufus holding her safely in the real world, Minerva bravely promises to follow the trail to the end and report everything she sees. Her sweeping vision suddenly plunges downward, rapidly zeroing in on an isolated wooden structure hidden deep within the dense wilderness. Hovering just outside the walls, she quickly identifies the structure as a rustic old house sitting quietly on the forest's edge near the eastern lake. Peering inside, she recoils in horror upon discovering a seemingly happy family completely engulfed by the suffocating, ink-black aura of Celica's curse. Before she can fully process the cursed family, the powerful magic violently yanks her vision away, dragging her straight toward the towering Grayling embassy. Crashing through the embassy walls, an absolute wave of dread washes over her as she witnesses Celica's dark mana blooming directly out of Prince Filbert's chest. The relentless vision pulls her away yet again, finally dropping her consciousness right in front of a massive, foreboding stone castle located just outside the capital. Piercing through the thick stone walls, her eyes widen in sheer terror as she recognizes a familiar, menacing crest etched into a massive magical circle on the floor. Blinding light fills the room as Minerva cries out in panic that her vision is abruptly cutting out. Collapsing with a sudden gasp, an exhausted Minerva reassures a frantic Rufus that she is just a little tired. Smiling warmly, Roan praises her incredible mental strength for hitting a distant target on her first try and notes that they share the same post-magic hunger. Acting swiftly, Rufus orders his men to recall their teams to organize the intel, prompting a bystander to playfully scold the overprotective prince to let Minerva sit down. Gathering her breath, Minerva reveals that her newly awakened power showed her the exact locations of the hidden curse sources scattered throughout the palace. Tracing the dark magic's path, she describes seeing Lord Filbert at the embassy and a distant family on the forest's edge somehow entangled in the sinister curse. Deep in thought, Minerva explains that her guiding light eventually led her to a mysterious castle with a distinct sigil drawn into its floor. Her brothers stand in stunned, wide-eyed silence as they process the sheer magnitude of her incredible new abilities. Smiling proudly, Rufus declares her clairvoyance a remarkable gift and suggests they quickly share the gathered intel to plan their next counterattack. Leaning over a detailed map, Rufus confirms that Celica's curse directly caused the royal illness and notes that Roan is already purifying the tainted sources. Staring intently at the marked locations, a shocked Minerva suddenly realizes that the cursed points form a massive, intricate pattern across the land. The group deduces that the pattern is actually a banned summoning circle designed to forcibly pull otherworldly power and amplify Celica's dark curse. Piecing the clues together, Rufus urgently asks Minerva if she could identify the crest flying above the castle where the identical sigil was drawn. Gasping in sudden realization, Minerva identifies the crest as belonging to Baron Lennox, the very same noble who suspiciously adopted Lily. The terrifying truth finally connects as they realize Celica did not randomly descend, but was deliberately summoned through forbidden arts on Lennox's land. Looking back at Filbert's suspicious political moves and his refusal to cure the royals, the group concludes the Crown Prince was deeply involved in the dark summoning. The room fills with absolute disgust as they condemn Filbert and Lennox as reckless fools for daring to dabble in such world-shattering taboos. Dark visions of cloaked figures performing a gruesome blood ritual remind them that summoning otherworlders requires human sacrifice, making it an unforgivable crime. Clenching his fist in blinding fury, Minerva's brother curses himself for not realizing Lennox's sudden closeness to Filbert the moment the prince broke the engagement. He painfully recalls how the three Bartnet brothers stood loyally by Filbert's side when the young prince was endlessly throwing tantrums. The cruel irony burns deeply as he realizes Filbert casually discarded Justin, his most fiercely loyal aide, for a treacherous baron and an arrogant otherworld. Reigning in his explosive anger, the brother vows to focus on the mission at hand but swears he will never forgive the disgraceful betrayal of his family. Stepping forward with cold authority, Rufus declares they must immediately visit the awakened royal chamber to force the king and queen to face their grandson's treason. The grand, ornate double doors of the royal bedroom loom silently before them. Inside the lavish chamber, a pale and deeply defeated King Keenan and Queen Olivia sit solemnly upon their bed. Bowing his head in profound shame, King Keenan admits he has absolutely no defense for endlessly indulging Filbert's reckless behavior. The weary royals listen in devastated silence as the full, crushing weight of their failures is finally laid bare. A stern voice reminds the monarchs of the agonizing pain they caused Minerva, demanding they use everything in their power to restore her honor. Weeping openly, Queen Olivia begs for Minerva's forgiveness and confesses that their blind, royal selfishness drove the innocent girl into sheer agony. Maintaining her absolute composure, Minerva gracefully accepts their heartfelt apology and thanks them for teaching her the very dignity that kept her strong. The king and queen weep in overwhelmed silence, utterly shattered by Minerva's incredible maturity and unwavering kindness. Wiping her eyes, the queen laments how horribly Filbert treated such a devoted woman, expressing deep relief that Minerva will finally be cherished in Grayling. Shaking his head in disgust, the king admits Filbert completely deceived them by masking his dark, forbidden summoning as a miraculous divine blessing. Her eyes hardening with lingering royal pride, the queen declares she firmly rejected Filbert's arrogant demand to crown Celica just because of her raw power. King Keenan agrees, revealing he actually threatened to sever all ties with his grandson if Filbert dared to throw Minerva away for such an unacceptable stranger. Rubbing his aching head, the king explains that right before they could expose the treasonous plot, a sinister magical fog crept over their minds and stole their free will. Radiating newfound resolve, the king vows to spend his remaining days guarding his people and personally destroying his foolish grandson's claim to the throne. Stepping forward, Rufus instructs the king to compile a list of royal-blooded nobles so the Greyring Emperor can pass ultimate judgment on this world-shattering crime. Triggered by the mention of bloodlines, Minerva recalls her vision of an elderly man in a rocking chair who bore an uncanny resemblance to the king himself. Apologizing for her absolute bluntness, Minerva directly asks the king if a close royal relative secretly left the succession line to live quietly among the commoners. Startled by their sudden appearance, an exhausted King Kenan asks how they managed to find him. Revealing a hidden royal lineage, the king explains he has an older half-brother born to a commoner who lived peacefully without succession rights. He explains that his brother's daughter married and had 2 sons, prompting an attentive Justin to ask if the prince is familiar with this specific family. A worried Minerva gently interrupts to ask why he is bringing up this distant branch of the royal family. The king confirms this is his brother's family, visualizing his niece and her husband living out their quiet lives. 2 energetic young grandsons round out the peaceful household, completely unaware of the dark royal politics. A sinking feeling of dread washes over Minerva as she realizes a crucial nephew is entirely missing from the cursed family portrait. She nervously pieces the puzzle together, wondering out loud if the manipulative Baron Lennox is somehow tied to this tragedy. Meanwhile, the grand and imposing exterior of the Grayling embassy stands silently under the cloudy sky. Looking deeply concerned, Minerva acknowledges that the palace is free of Celica's curse, leaving only the cursed half-brother's family and Lord Filbert to deal with. Taking swift command, Prince Rufus orders Roan and Marcus to purify the royal brother's household while sending Colin to investigate Baron Lennox's estate. Wrapping his cape with absolute authority, Rufus declares that he, Justin, and Minerva will return to the embassy to finally settle the score with Filbert. The determined trio marches silently down the ornate, candlelit halls of the embassy. Slipping away from prying eyes, they cautiously navigate a dark, hidden passageway built securely between the embassy's walls. Using the secret passage to observe their target undetected, they watch an infuriated Filbert furiously complain about the Grayling ambassador's blatant disrespect. Pacing angrily, Filbert loudly declares that Grayling's vow to protect Minerva is nothing but a blatant excuse to meddle in their kingdom's internal affairs. Watching from the shadows, Justin whispers that Nicholas is intentionally stalling to keep the foolish prince properly agitated. Blinded by his own arrogance, Filbert laughs off the idea that a high-ranking prince like Rufus would ever genuinely favor a dull woman like Minerva. As Filbert viciously insults her as a deadly dull woman, a tense Minerva grips her dress while Rufus glares with icy, silent fury. Completely unaware of his audience, the arrogant prince sneers that he doesn't need to waste his time on damaged, twice-jilted goods when women are lining up to marry him. Flexing his supposed authority, Filbert demands they hand Minerva over immediately, loudly proclaiming himself the undeniable future king of Ashland. A shocking truth clicks into place as Filbert cheerfully gloats that Baron Lennox's master plan will finally free him from Grayling's overwhelming influence. Throwing his arms wide in manic delight, the greedy prince boasts that he will exploit Celica's otherworldly powers to achieve absolute global dominance. Listening to his unhinged rant, a disgusted Minerva realizes the cunning Baron Lennox merely exploited Filbert's laziness to mold him into a perfect puppet king. Justin vividly recalls the Baron's strangely prestigious aura, noting the man possessed an undeniable regal presence that commanded respect. Staring coldly at the foolish prince, Rufus muses aloud about the crushing despair a man must feel knowing his royal blood is entirely useless due to his illegitimate birth. His eyes darkening with ruthless insight, Rufus notes that this resentment would easily fester into hatred if the rightful throne fell to an empty-headed tyrant. Connecting the bloody dots, Rufus reveals that the mysterious Baron is actually King Kenan's missing nephew and Filbert's own cousin. A chilling image of the Baron's true face flashes through Minerva's mind, depicting a bitter man forced to yield his kingdom to an absolute fool. Rufus grimly concludes that the vengeful Baron approached the foolish prince with pure malicious intent right from the start. Realizing that chaotic otherworlders simply do whatever they please, Minerva strongly doubts that Celica truly harbors any genuine love for Filbert. Refusing to offer pity, Minerva acknowledges that Filbert is no mere victim since he knowingly allowed his own grandparents to wither away. Slamming his fist in a violent rage, Filbert maliciously promises to throw Minerva straight into a cold prison cell the moment he reclaims her. Hearing his sister threatened with imprisonment, a fiercely protective Justin aggressively snarls that the arrogant prince is dead wrong. Boiling with murderous intent, Justin aggressively steps out of the shadows, but a panicked Minerva quickly grabs his arm to hold him back. Taking a deep breath to anchor his rage, Justin formally apologizes to Prince Rufus, acknowledging his true duty is to guard his sister. Gripping his sword hilt tightly, Justin sorrowfully admits that a lingering trace of loyalty compels him to fiercely rebuke his former master. Stepping fully into the light, Justin earnestly asks Minerva to forgive him for interrupting what should be her perfect moment of vengeance. The heavy, intoxicating words of revenge and absolute condemnation violently echo through Minerva's racing mind. Haunted by a ghastly, seductive vision of absolute power, she vividly imagines flaunting her new royal rank and laughing as she forces her abusers to kneel. Looking at her new fiancé, Minerva realizes that without Lord Rufus, she would still be blindly chasing vengeance. She deeply desires to push her brother forward, remembering how Justin silently swallowed his pain when Filbert unfairly stripped him of his post. Justin's eyes widen as someone encourages him to step up, reminding him that Minerva has already moved on with her new life. Standing firmly behind him, Rufus and Minerva assure Justin that he is the only right man to face the treacherous crown prince. Expressing his gratitude, a tense Justin admits he needs to land a punch on the fool before his patience completely explodes. Watching him walk away, Minerva smiles with unwavering faith that her brother will push through and take the necessary next step. Moving swiftly, Rufus casts a glowing protective barrier over Minerva to shield her from any lingering effects of Celica's charm. Minerva blushes and thanks the imperial prince, marveling at how incredibly warm his magical protection feels against her skin. A heavy wooden door stands ominously before them, sealing away the confronting truths waiting inside. Bursting into the room with explosive rage, Justin violently grabs Filbert and slams him into the ground. As a stunned Filbert stammers in confusion, Justin coldly mocks the prince for skipping his body arts practice and failing to land properly. Glaring up from the floor, a furious Filbert accuses Justin of losing his mind and threatens that he will never get away with the assault. Unsheathing his sword slightly, Justin warns the terrified crown prince to answer his questions honestly, reminding him that royalty must never show fear. Justin sorrowfully admits that while Filbert couldn't force himself to love Minerva, unfairly stripping Justin of his trusted aide position hurt the most. Pushing the prince down, Justin laments that Filbert let impulsive desires blind him to his royal duties, crushing Justin's dream of watching him grasp his burden. He fiercely reprimands Filbert for ignoring countless warnings about shady men, allowing Baron Lennox to prey on his pathetic weakness for flattery. Desperately deflecting the blame, Filbert yells at Justin to stop spewing nonsense and blindly defends Adam as the most loyal man in the world. Pinning the flailing prince down, Justin sneers and offers to guess exactly what lies that loyal man fed him. Trembling under the pressure, Filbert desperately claims he didn't want to believe it, but insists Celica genuinely came from another world. Justin's voice cracks with raw fury as he accuses Filbert of tossing away all morality to curse his own grandparents to death just to satisfy his petty desires. Overcome with grief, Justin recalls the witty, fun-loving prince he used to know, a man who always tried to make others laugh. Tears spilling from his eyes, Justin admits he could have lived with the betrayal if Filbert had truly fallen in love with Celica by chance. Filbert stares up in absolute shock, momentarily stunned to see his incredibly stoic former aide crying over him. Standing safely near the doorway, Minerva clutches her dress in surprise, having never seen her brother display such raw, unrestrained emotion. Justin painfully reminds Filbert that he watched over him since childhood, knowing he could never match the prince's natural talent or bear the grandparents' crushing expectations. Refusing to take responsibility, Filbert defensively shouts that his grandparents made him feel worthless and stupid, insisting he did nothing wrong. He desperately attempts to justify his actions, claiming he only followed Adam's advice to marry Celica and enjoy a simple life. Paranoia twisting his features, Filbert violently shoves Justin away and accuses his former friend of trying to ruin him. Exploding with deep-seated insecurity, Filbert screams that men like Justin secretly mocked him as a shallow, useless fool behind his back. Thrashing wildly, the enraged prince accuses Marcus, Colin, and Minerva of joining the massive conspiracy to look down on him. Filbert bitterly confesses that Minerva's immense popularity and effortless cleverness cut him to the bone, making all his own hard work feel like a pathetic, empty struggle. Screaming like a madman, Filbert admits he willingly summoned Celica as a desperate gamble to escape a future of constant humiliation. He claims the otherworldly girl was the only one who truly understood his pain, as she also hated the oppressive expectations of her family. Clutching a dark magical catalyst, an unhinged Filbert vows to rule the world alongside Celica to finally prove himself superior to everyone else. Suddenly, Filbert gasps in sheer agony and violently grips his chest, alarming Justin and the others. The crown prince collapses to his knees as an overwhelming wave of terrifying, dark mana erupts directly from his body. Stepping back in horror, a panicked Justin realizes that Celica's sinister magic is specifically targeting Filbert's life force. Completely blinded by delusion, a sweating Filbert smiles manically and praises the agonizing power as a divine gift of strength from his beloved Saintus. Without warning, a massive explosion of dark energy violently blasts the room's doors open, sending everyone flying backward. Moving with lightning reflexes, Prince Rufus throws his hand forward with a fierce glare to counter the overwhelming magical shockwave. Sweating under the strain, an exhausted Roan barks at Marcus to run faster while Prince Rufus assures Minerva that the embassy's magical barrier will keep everyone safe. Marcus angrily accuses Roan of stealing his rations, prompting the drained boy to scream that purifying a massive crowd burned through his stamina and left him starving. The two boys finally crash into the room, loudly apologizing to Prince Rufus and Lady Minerva for keeping them waiting during the chaos. Meanwhile, the dark toll of the recent events violently catches up with a completely drained Prince Filbert. The surrounding guards frantically scream his name as Lord Filbert collapses unconscious onto the cold floor. Observing the fallen prince, the group calmly deduces he merely fainted and decides to let Justin and Colin watch over him until he finally wakes up. Happily devouring a massive plate of sweets, Roan announces he is going to rest after completely burning himself out to lift the curse from King Kenan's brother's family. Staring out the window, a somber Minerva is haunted by the memory of Filbert screaming that her exceptional talents and abilities only ever caused him pain. She solemnly wonders if her desperate attempts to serve the nation as a perfect crown princess had actually clawed at his heart and driven him off the right path. Rufus gently interrupts her spiral of guilt, firmly reminding her that Filbert's twisted downfall is not her fault. Acknowledging their 10 years of mutual wounding, an overwhelmed Minerva bitterly regrets that she didn't notice his inner conflict before the disastrous Otherworlder was summoned. The imposing prince and the weary noblewoman share a quiet, understanding look amidst the heavy silence of the embassy. Smiling with surprising warmth, Rufus gently tells a startled Minerva that she is being far too hard on herself. He firmly declares that Filbert's massive ego eclipsed his pain, leading the foolish prince to chase an easy way out without weighing the severe consequences of summoning an Otherworlder. Nodding in fierce agreement, Roan states the cold facts, pointing out that even if Filbert fell into a trap, he still selfishly exploited an Otherworlder for personal gain. Roan insists that the cowardly Filbert must be present when they confront Celica, arguing that he cannot just run away after dragging her into this mess. Acknowledging his own complex history, Roan admits that Otherworlders are still people, leaving Minerva looking at the young boy with quiet awe. Rufus strongly backs Roan's judgment, declaring that no matter how difficult it is, Filbert must face the consequences of his alliance with Celica and Baron Lennox. Closing her eyes, Minerva accepts that getting crushed by her lingering guilt won't magically fix the immense damage Filbert has caused. Shaking off her doubts, a determined Minerva confidently announces she will use the recovered pocket watch and childhood portrait to pin down the Baron's true goal. A completely stuffed and blissful Roan rubs his belly, cheering Minerva on as he prepares to digest his massive feast. Knowing that clairvoyance requires absolute focus, Marcus and Roan clear out of the room to give her a quiet environment, promising to check back in an hour. A visibly drained Rufus rubs his forehead, claiming he needs a quick nap to recover from maintaining the barriers, though Minerva suspects he is intentionally laying it on thick. Sweeping her into his arms, the smooth-talking prince asks if Minerva will stay by his side while he rests. A heavily blushing Minerva stammers nervously, completely flustered by his sudden and incredibly bold proximity. Yielding to his gentle embrace, she shyly agrees to hold Lord Rufus while he rests his weary eyes. Looking down at his sleeping face, Minerva admits the angle feels a bit strange and ticklish while marveling at how genuinely beautiful he is. Realizing that he built absolute walls to keep countless swooning ladies away, her heart races as she understands she is the imposing prince's very first love. A warm wave of affection washes over her as she realizes his seemingly headlong proposal was likely driven by flipped nerves, proving he is just as anxious as she is. Listening to the quiet ticking of the clock, she tenderly accepts that they are experiencing the exact same overwhelming feelings for the first time. Waking up completely refreshed, Rufus praises Minerva's lap as literal healing magic and excitedly announces it is time to unravel Baron Lennox's riddle. Minerva firmly agrees that the Baron is almost certainly Filbert's great-uncle, noting they desperately need hard proof before making any formal accusations. They lay out their key clues on the table, preparing to use the missing uncle's pocket watch alongside the Baron's childhood portrait. Rufus instructs her to speak whatever flashes through her mind, trusting the clues and the enchanted topaz will lead her straight to the hidden truth. Reaching for his hand, an earnest Minerva asks if Lord Rufus will hold her exactly like he did the first time to help anchor her spirit. Holding her securely against his chest, Rufus gently commands her to let the magic lead her directly to the true owner of the watch. Minerva's clairvoyant consciousness violently launches out of her body, soaring through the sky at a terrifying speed that completely eclipses her first attempt. Spotting a massive castle on a hill, she confirms the missing uncle and Baron Lennox are indeed the same man as she phases directly into his formidable fortress. Inside the stone walls, a sinister Baron Lennox demands a trembling Celica complete a new summoning circle to bolster his power since Filbert's charm has gone completely silent. Observing the grim scene through her spiritual projection, a shocked Minerva barely recognizes the terrified girl, realizing Celica is absolutely nothing like the carefree otherworlder she once was. Trembling in the damp dungeon, Celica realizes that Lily is her first real friend in this world and shrinks back in absolute horror at the thought of sacrificing her. The treacherous uncle coldly explains that since Filbert failed to retrieve Celica, the otherworldly gods will have to make do with someone else's blood. Smirking cruelly, he casually reveals that he only took a little blood from Lily, noting that she was the only one foolish enough to answer the call. Grabbing Lily forcefully by the hair, the madman ignores her tearful apologies about her inadequate power and declares that her blood will reinforce her mana. Crying out in pain, a desperate Lily begs to know what will happen to Filbert, revealing that the charm she gave him was only meant to give him courage. Laughing maniacally before a massive, blood-stained summoning circle, the uncle mocks Lily for ever believing her pathetic charm would protect the prince. Pushing the weeping girl to the floor, he boasts that their hidden room will stall any intruders long enough for him to wipe out everyone from Ashurin and Greyring. Thrown violently against the cold stone wall, a helpless Lily groans in agony. She tearfully apologizes to the absent Filbert, admitting she dreamed too sweetly about finding freedom in this world but must now obey the uncle to survive. Shivering on the floor, Lily realizes with crushing despair that Filbert only loves her for her magical power, forcing her to play the role of his ideal saint. Snapping back from the intense clairvoyant vision, Minerva gasps and confirms she saw the exact same terrifying truth as Prince Rufus. Rufus notes that her remarkable focus allowed the Greyring heirloom topaz to show her everything, suggesting their minds might be closely linked. Covering her mouth in sheer horror, Minerva states that the carefree girl they once knew is gone and that Lily truly believes she is about to be murdered. Rufus fiercely declares that they will not stand by and let the foolish, irredeemable uncle have his way. Stepping forward protectively, the prince confidently reminds everyone that the god of this world granted them catalysts and small gifts to fight back against overwhelming otherworldly power. With renewed determination, Minerva agrees and insists that Filbert must be the one to stop the madness once he learns of Celica's immense suffering. Rufus vows that they will not abandon the couple or let Lily be sacrificed, finally understanding that Celica genuinely loves Filbert despite her accidental arrival. Looking ahead with unwavering resolve, Rufus promises to put an end to the dark conspiracy once and for all. An imposing army of Greyring knights stands ready with raised spears outside the ominous fortress of the mad uncle wielding warped justice. A soldier urgently reports to Prince Rufus that Baron Lennox's castle has been completely surrounded and secured. Tents are rapidly pitched on the grassy plains as the royal forces establish a secure field camp outside the besieged fortress. Inside a command tent, Justin reassuringly tells Minerva that news of the enemy's complete surrender should reach them within a few hours. Apologizing for making everyone worry, Minerva confesses that she desperately wanted to follow Lord Rufus into battle but knew her lack of combat skills would only hinder him. Justin kindly promises to help train Minerva so she can safely and effectively support His Highness closely in the future. The group confidently discusses how Roan and Rufus's elite forces are perfectly built for this type of combat, expecting the capture mission to go smoothly. Minerva smiles brightly as she imagines a fired-up Roan rushing into battle, leaving her poor brother Marcus stuck hauling mountains of crystals and rations. Justin points out that Minerva's extraordinary clairvoyance might still be subconsciously linked to Rufus after their minds synced back at the embassy. Looking down at her hands, Minerva humbly admits she still feels unable to control her newly awakened talent, questioning if it is truly as extraordinary as they claim. Shifting to serious matters, Justin reviews the investigation report revealing that the cruel uncle is actually Marshal Kylemore, a ruthless man of royal blood. Rufus previously explained that Marshall left his home near the Wandering Woods in his youth to obsessively hunt for forbidden texts on summoning otherworlders. Minerva's clairvoyance confirms the horrifying truth that Marshall murdered the real Baron Lennox on the road and stole his identity to infiltrate the nobility. A dark, somber vision of a forgotten skull resting in the marshy waters flashes through Minerva's mind. Justin pieces together that Marshall maintained the impersonation because the real, frail Baron spent his childhood away at health resorts, leaving no one to recognize his true face. The dark ink of history splatters over the memory of Marshall ruthlessly executing the murder and seamlessly assuming his false noble life. Maintaining the clever deception for 20 years, Marshall sent regular letters home to a father who trusted him completely, even as he plotted to curse his own family. A deeply troubled Minerva wonders aloud why Marshall would harbor such intense, venomous hatred for not just the Assuran royals, but his own flesh and blood. Despite knowing Filbert is tightly bound to prevent Celica's mana from running wild, Minerva insists her chest is in knots because she has something absolutely critical to tell him. Justin warns her that Lord Filbert is currently staring vacantly at nothing and turning away from reality, making conversation nearly impossible. Closing his eyes in reluctant resignation, Justin finally yields to her unwavering resolve and allows her to see the broken prince. Stepping into the secure holding area, Minerva softly calls out to Lord Filbert, determined to share the painful truth about the woman he loves. Bound to a chair, a defeated Prince Filbert stares downward in absolute, heavy silence. Minerva approaches the captive prince, gently explaining that a suffering Celica desperately wants to see him while being blamed for her lack of power. She firmly reminds him that Celica only obeyed the fake Baron out of love, declaring that they both must atone for knowingly wielding a deadly curse. Staring earnestly at the fallen royal, Minerva passionately insists that Celica truly loves him. She softly challenges him, asking if his genuine love for Celica and desire to make her a fine queen wasn't the real reason he originally begged Minerva to tutor her again. Stepping forward, Prince Rufus sternly warns Filbert that averting his eyes and abandoning Celica now will leave him with a lifetime of bitter regret. Acknowledging the tragedy, Minerva reflects that despite being deemed a failure by those who summoned her, Celica was genuinely happy just to be loved. She begs Filbert not to abandon the crying girl, urging him to share his heart and tell her she has done enough, even if Minerva herself can never forgive their crimes. An ethereal light bursts through the room as Minerva's magical projection connects the captive Filbert to the distant castle. Back in the castle, a sharp sword is suddenly drawn against the stunned Baron as a commanding voice orders Marshal Kylemore to surrender. The unmasked Baron wildly demands to know how they discovered his true name, completely trapped by an imposing Prince Rufus and his armed knights. Watching the vision unfold, a bewildered Minerva asks Lord Rufus if the glowing topaz is projecting the castle's events directly into their minds. Staring in sheer horror at the glowing projection, the panicked Baron realizes the Prince Rufus standing before him in the castle is nothing but a magical illusion. As the real Rufus declares they have absolute proof of his crimes, Minerva calms the room by explaining the projection is a harmless power granted by the Grayling treasure. Glaring with absolute malice, the cornered Baron snarls at them to fix the truth in their minds. Barking for silence, the bitter man wildly gloats that he successfully ruined Crown Prince Filbert and humiliated the Ashland royals as revenge for scorning his royal blood. He boasts about his cunning manipulation, explaining how he removed the protective Bartnet family by goading Filbert's pride and forcing the foolish prince to sever his own bonds. Cursing his father for living as a lowly commoner despite their royal lineage, the Baron manically praises the dark gods for answering his twisted prayers with an otherworld. Rufus coldly declares the Baron's soul to be the exact opposite of noble, though the delusional man still proclaims himself the only true royalty. The gathered heroes firmly state that they united their small, God-given gifts to completely shatter his vile ambition. Screaming in absolute denial, the enraged Baron completely rejects the existence of a god, arguing a true deity would never have abandoned a man of royal blood like him. His desperate hope to stall for time and finish the summoning circle is instantly crushed when Roan cheerfully announces they already secured the site and destroyed his ritual. Thoroughly defeated and surrounded by heavily armed knights, the broken conspirator is roughly hauled away. Thrashing wildly, the furious Baron violently turns his wrath on a trembling Celica, viciously branding her a stupid and useless failure. A devastated Celica breaks down, cursing the otherworldly god who saddled her with such a pathetic summoner while lamenting her absolute inability to save him. Recalling her arrival, she tearfully remembers how incredibly happy she felt when Filbert treated her with gentle, unexpected kindness. Shaking uncontrollably, she confesses she was considered a complete failure in her original world, making Filbert the first person to ever truly cherish her. A sneering baron brutally mocks her devotion, laughing off her claim that she pushed her limits entirely for Filbert's sake. The malicious man gleefully promises that Filbert must absolutely hate her now, venomously reminding her that the charm she offered was actually a deadly curse. As the baron gleefully taunts her with the revelation that everything he told her was a lie, a disgusted Minerva finally decides she has heard enough. Acknowledging Celica's undeniable crimes, Prince Rufus fiercely declares he cannot just stand by and watch someone be abused out of pure malice. Stepping forward with blistering speed, the prince delivers a devastating, full-force punch straight to the baron's jaw. The vicious blow sends the arrogant baron crashing onto the stone floor, knocking him completely unconscious. Turning his piercing gaze back to the trembling otherworlder, Rufus solemnly commands Celica to face her atonement. He coldly informs her that she will be permanently separated from Filbert, offering her one final chance to ask him a question. A desperate Celica only begs to know if Filbert is safe, prompting Rufus to honestly admit the prince's body survived but his heart remains a mystery. Though Celica tearfully tries to take the sole blame for using the dark mana, she is firmly reminded that Filbert chose his path and must also atone. Rufus explains that the Grayling Empire will mercifully watch to see if Filbert fights to rebuild his life or simply allows himself to end in miserable ruin. Closing her eyes, a sorrowful Celica silently accepts the heavy, unchangeable reality of their broken fates. Escorted by the solemn guards, the defeated girl from another world is quietly led away to face justice. Looking somber, Minerva watches as a bound and defeated Filbert groans quietly inside the holding tent. Bowing his head in deep despair, Filbert admits his actions as a hopeless fool only brought misery to his family and to Minerva. Meeting her serious gaze, the former prince confesses he looked down on her just to mask his own weakness, knowing an apology cannot fix the past. A fleeting vision of a younger, arrogant Filbert rejecting her flashes as Minerva closes her eyes in silent reflection. Maintaining her absolute composure, Minerva acknowledges their shared suffering and notes that a little mutual understanding might have changed their future entirely. Accepting his inevitable judgment from the Grayling Empire, Filbert swears he wants to truly change before he dies rather than perish a coward. Recognizing his newfound humility, Minerva gently reassures the fallen prince that his genuine transformation has already begun. Turning away, she encourages him to live the rest of his life decently and honestly, fully aware they will likely never cross paths again. Royal guards swiftly escort a bound Filbert and a silent Celica out of the tent while Minerva watches them depart. Pausing for a brief moment, a blindfolded Filbert softly thanks Minerva for her parting grace. Smiling gently, Minerva sincerely wishes him happiness as the broken couple is led away into the falling leaves. Standing alone in the breeze, Minerva bids a final farewell as the guards secure Filbert into the waiting carriage. News rapidly sweeps across the land that the Ashkelon king and queen revealed the absolute truth, leading to the immediate capture of Filbert, Celica, and the mastermind Marshall. The nobility reels in shock as wave after wave of scandals break, from the cursed monarchs and Filbert's disinheritance to the royal bastard Marshall orchestrating Celica's dark summoning. The grand, imposing exterior of House Bartnet stands resolute amidst the kingdom's sudden political upheaval. Inside the estate, a bright-eyed Minerva beams with renewed purpose as she organizes a massive pile of important letters. Her brother sighs in sheer exasperation, realizing the mountain of invitations is mostly opportunistic nobles trying to exploit Minerva's royal engagement. Sitting with her siblings, Minerva notes that many letters are desperate attempts to snag wedding invites, while Colin chuckles at their parents' private shock over high society's rapid hypocrisy. Standing solemnly by the window, Justin reads a letter addressing him as the newly chosen king amidst Ashkelon's brief political chaos. With Lord Rufus's guidance and the stark reluctance of other candidates, Justin was ultimately selected from the ducal house to carry the kingdom's fate. Smiling warmly at Minerva, Justin vows that guarding the country as the next king is the truest loyalty he can show his former lord. Before the final transfer, Justin speaks quietly with an imprisoned Filbert, right before Marshall and the prince are exiled to an offshore island and Celica is sent to a specialist facility. Standing in the sunlit study, Minerva acknowledges the complicated burden Justin bears by receiving the crown once meant for his childhood friend. Despite his bitter fall from privilege, A dignified Filbert reportedly strives to change behind high walls, telling the painful truth without hesitation. Relieved, Minerva reflects on the brief, final meeting granted to Filbert and Celica, hoping it brought them both a small measure of salvation. Chuckling nervously, Justin anticipates the grueling slog of choosing a capable queen from the swarming ladies now that he is the official crown prince. Shifting his focus, Justin promises to protect the country while helping Minerva prepare for the highly anticipated major event coming up. Cheering crowds and falling confetti fill the bustling streets as the magnificent carriage of Emperor Tristan Albert Grayling arrives for a state visit. Smiling in admiration, Justin gently tells a nervous Minerva that she does not need to check her appearance a dozen times. Blushing brightly, Minerva twirls in her impeccably elegant dress, overjoyed that Ashland's own seamstresses worked so hard to create it. A thrilled Marcus praises the brilliant initiative to invite Grayling's master tailors to mentor local artisans, noting the massive economic boost it will bring. Seizing a golden business opportunity, Marcus eagerly plots to advertise this new Grayling-style local attire to potential brides while accompanying Minerva on her journey. As the siblings playfully bicker over Marcus's terrible sales pitch, Minerva reflects fondly on their final precious days together before she leaves for the Empire. Laughter fills the sunlit room as the four Bartnett siblings share a deeply heartwarming, joyful moment together. Standing side by side, Justin and Minerva look toward the future with bright, unwavering smiles. A massive crowd roars with excitement outside the Grand Palace, eagerly awaiting the start of the splendid ceremony for the arriving imperial family. Joyous citizens pack the decorated streets, cheering wildly as the ornate royal carriage approaches the gates. Minerva's heart pounds with overwhelming anticipation as heavy boots ascend the palace steps. Stepping into the brilliant light, a devastatingly handsome Lord Rufus arrives in his immaculate imperial uniform. Moving with absolute grace, Prince Rufus descends the steps to finally reunite with his beloved bride. A grand image shows Emperor Tristan and Empress Seraphina standing alongside a young boy and a tall, imposing man with long dark hair. The striking Emperor Tristan and his elegant Empress Seraphina exchange a warm, dignified glance amidst the floating petals. The young Crown Prince Reginald looks on with bright, curious eyes. A narrator reflects that these majestic figures are the ones standing at the very summit of the Grayling Empire, soon to become family. The Ashland representatives formally welcome the imperial family, expressing deep honor at their presence on behalf of the kingdom. Emperor Tristan warmly greets the gathered nobles, graciously granting them permission to rise. Rufus turns his attention to a beautifully dressed Minerva as she stands gracefully among the assembled crowd. Crown Prince Reginald eagerly approaches Minerva, excitedly praising her stunning beauty and exclaiming that he has been dying to meet his uncle's future bride. Emperor Tristan fondly holds Reginald and compliments Minerva's poise, noting that Rufus is genuinely happy just by seeing her face. A deeply moved Empress Seraphina welcomes Minerva with open arms, thanking her for bringing such immense joy to her dear brother-in-law. Blushing under the praise, Rufus's family cheerfully assures Minerva that beneath his cold exterior lies a steadfast, patient man who will make a wonderful husband. The royals proudly declare it their duty to witness Rufus's happiness, completely thrilled that the notoriously stoic man has finally opened his heart to love. Watching the joyous interaction, the Ashland nobles realize that the Grayling imperial family is bound by deep, genuine affection. Minerva and Rufus exchange respectful, formal greetings with Emperor Tristan and Empress Seraphina. Gazing at him with profound devotion, Minerva silently vows that she loves Lord Rufus deeply, scars and all. She earnestly explains that after a season of heartbreak, Rufus's genuine need for her finally made her feel allowed to pursue a long, happy life together. Empress Seraphina gently embraces a surprised Minerva, warmly welcoming her to the family and promising to support her new life in Grayling with everything she has. Observing the couple's quiet joy, the Emperor notes that Rufus finally looks his age, urging them to spend some time together before the welcome ceremony begins. Walking down the hall together, a slightly embarrassed Rufus admits his family's teasing was overwhelming, though a smiling Minerva confesses she was simply happy to see a new side of him. Looking deeply into her eyes, Rufus promises to formally give her an engagement ring and excitedly anticipates sharing everything Grayling has to offer with her. A breathless Minerva gazes up at him as the imposing prince gently adjusts his uniform. Holding her hand, Rufus honestly admits that adapting to life in Grayling will be challenging as he balances his royal duties with his efforts to improve the empire. Pledging his absolute protection, he earnestly begs Minerva to trust him, declaring that with her by his side he can reach any horizon. Beautiful flowers bloom as Minerva solemnly vows to gladly follow him, accepting that guarding people at his side is her true calling despite any future hardships. In a moment of pure, overwhelming affection, Rufus pulls his precious bride into a tender embrace as they passionately confess their deep love for one another. Outside, the grand Ashland estate stands proudly bathed in warm, radiant sunlight. Emperor Tristan confidently grasps his royal scepter, radiating absolute authority as he prepares for the ceremony. A solemn Ashland noble watches with quiet respect while the emperor stands regally upon the dais before the kneeling crowd. Turning to the happy couple, the smiling emperor graciously grants Rufus and Minerva the honor of the first dance. Hand in hand, Rufus and Minerva glide effortlessly across the ballroom floor, completely lost in each other's eyes as flower petals fall around them. The sweeping, magnificent cityscape of the Grayling Empire stretches out beneath a bright, hopeful sky. Staring at the majestic domes of their new home, Minerva confidently believes that whatever awaits them in Grayling will be absolutely wonderful. Back in the estate, delicate roses bloom wildly across the stone courtyard, symbolizing a vibrant new beginning. A serious noble stops Minerva before her departure to Grayling, revealing there is one final piece of news she must hear. He explains that Geoffrey Mortmain has been entirely disinherited for his cruel plots, though a relieved Minerva learns that the maid Lily and her baby are safe. The noble recounts how Geoffrey's desperate attempt to cozy up to the new king failed, leading the Marquis to strip him of his status and banish him to a remote slice of land. Trapped in a bleak house arrest, an infuriated Geoffrey furiously bites his nail and curses Filbert for ruining his life. A devastated Lily stares out the window of their isolated home, bitterly lamenting that none of this would have happened if Filbert hadn't summoned a saint. In a flashback, a younger Lily remembers being fired as a maid after her scandalous affair with Geoffrey went public, leading Celica to introduce her to Baron Lennox. Lily tearfully confesses that she was taken to a hidden room in the Baron's castle, where she stood before a strange pattern and lost all memory of what happened next. Wondering why Lady Celica was suddenly arrested, Lily recalls how she unexpectedly ended up living with Lord Geoffrey in a small country house. Accepting her quiet life as a commoner, Lily sits in a solemn room with a distressed Geoffrey, deciding it is best to stay ignorant of the unspoken truth. A deliverman arrives at the door and hands Lily a letter, confirming she is the intended recipient. Staring down at the mysterious envelope, a confused Lily wonders who could possibly be writing to her. Opening the letter, she discovers a pair of elegant earrings alongside a tear-inducing note from Celica saying a final goodbye. Tears immediately well up in Lily's wide eyes as the heartbreaking weight of the farewell washes over her. A vivid memory surfaces of Lily and Celica happily attending a lavish high society gathering together in stunning gowns. In the flashback, a cheerful Celica promises to teach her noble etiquette and arranges for her adoption by Baron Lennox to elevate her status. Clutching the farewell letter to her chest, Lily remembers Celica arrogantly claiming that everything always goes her way as long as Lily obeys. Staring out the window at the gently falling snow, Lily quietly mourns the tragic loss of her first real friend. Back at the Grand Bartnet estate, a bright and cheerful Minerva looks out her window and rejoices at the beautifully clear weather. Gazing up at the bright sky, she happily declares it the perfect day for a fresh start as they finally set out for the Grayling Empire. Checking her practical outfit in the mirror, Minerva remembers Rufus asking her to meet him in the garden for exercise and wonders what he is actually planning. Arriving in the sunlit garden, Minerva greets Rufus, who smoothly steps forward to properly introduce his inner circle before they begin. Rufus introduces Jem Campbell as her new personal physician, appoints the stoic Evan Hyde as her bodyguard, and points out the infamous Roan Astley. Bowing respectfully, Evan swears to serve Minerva with all his heart while Rufus strictly commands him to protect her at all times. A buzzing Roan enthusiastically promises to assist Evan and hover around Minerva constantly, prompting her to laugh and thank them for their unwavering support. Stepping closer with a warm smile, Rufus reveals that he, Evan, and Roan have prepared a special gift just for her. Evan presents a beautiful box filled with stunning, flower-shaped confections, leaving Minerva absolutely delighted by the adorable treats. A smiling Evan explains that his ancestors were actually brilliant healers, revealing that the confection is a traditional, restorative recipe from his home island. He proudly adds that he poured himself into reviving their fading herbal craft, finally harvesting the essential aloe bean needed to complete the remedy. Handing her the treats, Rufus explains he wanted her to have a portable ration to satisfy her intense hunger after using her exhausting clairvoyance. Touched by their incredible thoughtfulness, Minerva carefully picks up one of the small candies to finally taste it. Her face lights up with joy as the intriguing layers of flavor melt perfectly on her tongue, prompting her to save the rest as a little charm. Looking deeply into her eyes, Rufus reveals there is one more present, describing it not as a physical object but as an essential experience. He admits it stung staying behind during Marshall's scheme due to his lack of combat training, noting that Nicholas mentioned her strong desire to learn self-defense. Surprised and profoundly moved by his attentiveness, Minerva stares at the Imperial Prince with sparkling, emotional eyes. Rufus explains that Evan will teach her stamina building, breathing, and forms from an old martial art so she can confidently protect herself and back him up. Outlining their routine, Rufus promises to practice daily with her to build core strength while Evan drills her heavily during guard duty. A thrilled Minerva excitedly vows to give it everything she has, aiming to sharpen her clairvoyance to make finding catalysts significantly easier. Clenching her fists with unwavering determination, she declares her absolute resolve to become strong enough to follow Rufus anywhere. After a grueling morning session, an exhausted Minerva heavily catches her breath while Evan instructs her to review the martial forms later. Smiling fondly at her enthusiastic spirit, Rufus suggests they rest a bit before packing, admitting that seeing her so undeniably happy makes him happy too. Bustling maids and servants load heavy luggage as a magnificent, ornate royal carriage waits outside the grand estate gates. A quiet, peaceful moment passes as the final travel preparations settle perfectly into place. Smiling warmly, Rufus tells Minerva's parents he cannot wait to see them at the engagement ceremony in Greyring, promising to take absolute care of their daughter. Shaking Justin's hand firmly, Rufus trusts him to be a crown prince the people can be proud of, while Justin vows to give everything for the realm and for Filbert. Winking confidently, Marcus promises to protect Minerva on the road, boasting that as the next duke, he will easily win over all the Greyring ladies. A glaring Marcus fiercely yells at Roan for calling him rough and muscle-bound, completely shattering his suave, charming facade in seconds. Standing closely beside her smiling Imperial Prince, Minerva bids a loving farewell to her family as they finally set off toward their bright new future. A beautiful carriage prepares to depart from the estate as two elegant women share a warm, heartfelt embrace. Sitting in the carriage, Rufus explains that visiting trusted nobles before the social season begins will help ease Minerva into her new life. He announces their first stop on the way to the capital is the manor of Margrave Gilgren, a great house guarding the historic frontier. Minerva gazes out the window in quiet awe as the imposing, heavily fortified stone castle of the Gilgren family comes into view. The royal carriage finally arrives at the grand estate, where the household staff and family stand in perfect formation to welcome them. Stepping forward with absolute respect, Margrave Gilgren warmly welcomes Prince Rufus and Lady Minerva to the Greyring Empire. The proud Margrave formally introduces his wife Cordelia, his heir Romney, and his two beautiful daughters, Sophie and Mia. The two young daughters stand elegantly in their lavish gowns, beaming with bright and welcoming smiles. Standing nearby, the sharp-eyed heir Romney silently observes the arrival of the esteemed royal guests. Instructing his daughters to properly attend to Minerva, the Margrave politely suggests she rest today before tomorrow's grand welcome party. Sophie and Mia respectfully guide Minerva down the sunlit corridor as the men head off to discuss official matters. An overly excited Mia practically bounces with joy, eagerly telling Minerva how thrilled she has been to finally meet her. Lacking all restraint, Mia blurts out that Minerva's life is a fairy tale since she snatched a prince after losing her first fiancé to an otherworld. A deeply mortified Sophie immediately bows in utter shame, terribly apologizing for her sister's completely offensive outburst. Smiling with unbothered grace, Minerva gently reassures Sophie that she isn't upset and understands Mia only meant well. As Sophie presents the guest room, Minerva silently notes that the steady older sister is entirely different from the rash and heedless Mia. Stepping into her lavish quarters, Minerva's eyes instantly light up at the sight of the gorgeous flower arrangements decorating the room. Discovering that Sophie personally grew every bloom, a thrilled Minerva excitedly reveals that she also absolutely adores gardening. With a warm smile, Sophie promises to assist with anything she might need before politely leaving Minerva to rest. The next morning, a cheerful Sophie greets Minerva in the sunlit garden while a maid gracefully prepares their tea. Wishing to show her gratitude, Minerva presents the girls with beautiful dolls and hair ornaments expertly crafted by Ashuran artisans. Sensing their hesitant surprise, Minerva kindly urges the two girls to go ahead and open their delicate gifts. A stunning doll and a masterfully crafted floral hairpin are revealed, carefully selected by Minerva to suit each girl's unique charm. Sophie graciously marvels at how perfectly the gifts match their hair and eyes, while a jealous Mia glares darkly at her sister's present. Completely ignoring basic manners, Mia rudely demands to trade gifts, selfishly insisting that Sophie's doll and hairpins suit her better. Throwing a violent tantrum, Mia aggressively snatches the doll straight out of her sister's hands while screaming that she can do whatever she wants. Romney quickly intervenes with a furious glare, warning Mia that starting a brawl in front of a guest carries severe consequences. A panicking Mia frantically denies getting violent, but Romney coldly promises to report her shameful behavior to the prince and their father immediately. Mia flees the garden in tears while a deeply embarrassed Sophie apologizes to Minerva for her sister's foolish public outburst. Sophie tiredly admits she usually just gives in when Mia throws a fit, prompting Minerva to gently remind her that Mia's intense greed isn't her fault. Revealing their fragmented past, Sophie explains they only began living together 4 years ago after their busy father remarried. Sitting quietly at the table, a somber Sophie confesses that despite sharing blood, she truly struggles to understand her younger sister. Prince Rufus urgently arrives to check on Minerva's safety, while a deeply apologetic Margrave announces he has confined Mia to the detached wing. The Margrave fiercely promises to strictly re-educate his daughter to preserve their house's honor, leaving Minerva to gracefully thank him for his swift action. Though Sophie insists her sister is usually sweet and sunny, a troubled Minerva desperately hopes she is simply overthinking the situation. The group gathers in the elegant sitting room, enveloped in a heavy but calm atmosphere as they attempt to move past the morning's chaos. Sensing Sophie's earnest attempt to look out for her, Minerva warmly accepts her invitation to tour the personally tended gardens later. Changing the subject, the Margrave proudly mentions that Sophie was recently engaged to Robert Dialem, calling him an incredibly promising young man. Smiling with pure affection, Sophie explains they grew up playing together and affectionately praises Robert as a serious, sincere, and dependable partner. Observing Sophie's profound love for her fiancé, a chilling wave of dread crashes over Minerva as she remembers Mia's twisted habit of coveting whatever her sister likes. Sitting together in a grand carriage, an attentive Rufus gently tells Minerva not to let her thoughts spiral. Changing the subject to ease her mind, Rufus suggests they invite Robert to join their upcoming garden walk. The peaceful mood is shattered when a flustered Margrave Gilgren reports that Robert is missing and his parents from the Dialam market have no idea where he is. Bowing deeply, the Margrave apologizes for the repeated disgrace, while Minerva offers to go look for the missing fiancé. Knowing her tendencies, Rufus firmly warns Minerva not to even think about using her clairvoyance to find the young man. Stepping out toward the grand estate, Minerva confidently reassures herself that the situation will surely end without incident. As the clock ticks heavily in the silent room, a maddening wait ensues for the search party to return. Frustrated by the ordeal, Marcus fiercely criticizes Robert for being no man at all and leaving his fiancée Sophie so anxious. Without warning, a frantic voice echoes through the hall, urging someone to return to their room before the dire situation is reported to His Highness. Down the grand hallway, a devastated young woman collapses to her knees in sheer shock. Rushing to her side, a deeply concerned Minerva calls out to a trembling, heartbroken Sophie. Her eyes wide with horror, Sophie reveals the unthinkable truth that her father just caught Robert in bed with her own sister, Mia. Desperate to make sense of the nightmare, Sophie turns away and insists she needs to hear the truth from Robert directly. Tears streaming down her face, the panicked girl runs frantically down the corridor. Sobbing uncontrollably, Sophie wonders how Mia and Robert could be so unhappy with her that they would commit such a profound betrayal. His face grim with shame, Margrave Gilgren sadly confirms that the two traitors are already deeply entangled. Moving with gentle compassion, Minerva embraces the weeping Sophie to offer her whatever comfort she can. His features hardening into icy fury, Rufus declares he will personally interrogate the guilty parties and mete out severe punishment for ruining the joyous day. The Margrave prepares to take his daughter away, but Rufus firmly reminds the parents that they must face this scandal head-on. Refusing to rest in her room, a pale Sophie passionately insists that she must see Mia and Robert to uncover the absolute truth. Turning to Lady Minerva, A terrified Sophie begs her to lend her the same incredible courage she used to survive her own past hardships. Gripping Minerva's hands, the desperate girl pleads for a way to stay strong in the face of such devastating betrayal. Minerva's heart aches as she realizes that simply sharing her own painful story will not stop Sophie's body from violently shaking. Remembering the special gift she received earlier, Minerva quickly pulls a small pouch from her dress. Reaching out gently, she places a small, miraculous confection into Sophie's trembling palm. With a warm and reassuring smile, Minerva offers to share the protective amulet that was given to her. She gently explains that the sweet remedy from His Highness is made by a legendary witch's descendants and will calm her shattered nerves. Swallowing the delicious sweet, Sophie thanks Minerva and bravely asks if she can truly become strong enough so she won't break. Bolstered by her newfound resolve, Sophie promises her father she will maintain her composure, prompting him to finally fetch mangarecap. Standing solemnly before the estate, Rufus notes that revealing the family's unconcealed disgrace is the only genuine sincerity they can offer. A heavy, suffocating silence hangs over the room as the somber group prepares to confront the traitors. The heavy wooden doors finally swing open to reveal the source of the disgraceful scandal. Inside the study, a thoroughly disheveled Robert sits rigidly in his chair while a defiant Mia glares across the table. Arms crossed and entirely unrepentant, Mia glares at the furious adults while Robert guiltily averts his eyes. The furious Margrave shouts at his foolish daughter to stay silent, but an arrogant Mia loudly complains about outsiders interfering in their family business. When her father roars that they are there to punish the couple, Mia casually dismisses him and asks what the problem is since Robert will just marry her instead. Smiling with infuriating smugness, Mia claims Robert prefers her anyway and that swapping brides to the younger sister is barely an issue. His eyes narrowing with absolute disgust, Rufus sharply reprimands the senseless girl for showing zero shame while imperial guests are present. Rufus coldly guarantees that the stain they left will not wash out easily, promising that every noble at the gathering will hear of their scandalous betrayal by tonight. As mangarecap furiously orders his idiotic son to speak, an equally disgusted Minerva realizes the vicious noble gossip will inevitably drag the entire family down. Sweating profusely, Robert desperately stammers to the Margrave that his affair with Mia was merely a momentary lapse and blames her relentless advances. A shocked Mia watches in horror as Robert cowardly tells Sophie that the affair was just a meaningless fling caused entirely by her sister's temptation. Furious at his betrayal, Mia screams that he promised to break his engagement with Sophie, though a panicking Robert vehemently denies ever saying such a thing. Staring down with absolute disgust, Sophie brands him a vile and worthless man while the pathetic Robert begs for forgiveness and insists he was simply manipulated. Continuing his pathetic display, Robert whines that he has apologized enough and asks Sophie to just forgive him since he was the true victim. Glaring fiercely, Sophie firmly rejects his childish excuses and proudly declares she will no longer watch her family's hearts be trampled by his deceit. Stepping forward, Minerva coldly points out that Mia only ever wanted to steal from her sister, asking Robert if he truly failed to imagine the massive disaster his actions would cause. As a frantic Mia screams that Robert promised to marry her and blames Sophie for the breakup, Minerva calmly concludes that the younger sister only crossed the line to steal the title of future Marchioness. The Margrave's face twists in sheer outrage as he realizes Robert exploited House Gilgarin's highly confidential underground passage, a secret he openly admits Mia told him. Standing protectively beside Minerva, Prince Rufus grimly notes that Robert used the deeply guarded crisis escape tunnels to carry out his secret meetings with Mia. Boiling with absolute fury, the Margrave barks that Robert has committed a fatal offense against the Empire, forcing them to extensively rebuild the heavily compromised secret tunnels. Slamming a heavy book onto the table, the Margrave aggressively demands Robert surrender all his notes and permanently forbids him from marrying into their family. Flashing a dangerous, knowing smirk, Rufus chillingly points out that Mia betrayed the secret behind closed doors, ensuring Robert has absolutely no proof to defend himself. Realizing his life is completely ruined, a frantic Robert begs not to be disinherited, viciously throwing both sisters under the bus in a desperate attempt to save himself. Completely disgusted by his shameless cruelty, the Margrave furiously orders his guards to restrain the wailing fool and throw him directly into a carriage. The stone-faced guards tightly grip the ousted nobleman's arms, preparing to haul him away as Minerva suddenly calls out to stop him. Staring coldly at the pathetic man, Minerva bitterly admits she thought she knew his true character but realizes her judgment was entirely flawed. With an icy and resolute gaze, she slowly raises her hand to present a small, meaningful ring. Returning the ring with devastating finality, she firmly declares that while she cannot forgive Mia, she is deeply grateful to be freed from such a despicable man. Refusing to show any remorse, a pathetic Robert sneers that his only crime was falling for a shameless woman while blindly clinging to the fact that they have no hard proof of his treason. Dragged mercilessly down the grand hall by the imperial guards, the delusional man arrogantly shouts that she will never find true happiness without him. A heavy silence falls over the room as Minerva stands visibly shaken by his cruel parting words, prompting a deeply concerned Sophie to softly call her name. Trembling with delayed shock, Sophie desperately embraces Minerva and confesses her sheer terror at the monster Robert became, while Minerva gently praises her for standing tall. Holding the crying girl tightly, Minerva realizes her fierce desire to protect Sophie stems from far more than just the painful echoes of her own past. Stripped of her arrogant facade, a terrified Mia shrinks back in sheer dread as she realizes she has been completely tossed aside. Glaring with absolute, unforgiving authority, the Margrave sternly orders Mia to pack her bags immediately for a permanent exile to Poulter Abbey. Thrashing and sobbing wildly, Mia desperately tries to leverage a potential pregnancy to escape the convent, but her father coldly dismisses her as a spoiled, willful girl whose greatest sin was abusing her sister. Refusing to yield, the Margrave declares she must learn accountability in a much stricter environment, completely ignoring her pathetic cries that her sister's happiness forced her to do it. Shifting his focus to his eldest daughter, the Margrave firmly instructs Sophie to maintain her poise so she might secure a far worthier match at tonight's grand social affair. Pushed entirely to her emotional limit, a devastated Sophie tearfully begs her unyielding father for just a moment of peace. Watching the Margrave march away, Minerva solemnly reflects that a freshly shattered Sophie desperately needs a safe place to fall rather than being immediately forced back into high society. Standing solemnly beside the imposing prince, a frustrated Minerva admits she lacks the authority to push the matter any further. Seizing absolute control of the situation, Prince Rufus firmly informs the sweating Margrave that he and Minerva will be staying a while longer for a private discussion. Sitting quietly in the elegant parlor, Minerva looks up as Rufus gently notes that the day's brutal events likely dragged up painful memories from her own past. Gazing at her with profound devotion, the prince tenderly admits he hates seeing her in pain, easily reading her heart to confirm she is deeply worried about Sophie's shattered spirit. Haunted by her own survival, Minerva solemnly reflects that new hope is incredibly hard to find when you are forced to forge ahead without a single moment to properly heal. Leaning in close, Rufus smoothly validates her fierce desire to protect the broken girl, gently agreeing that Sophie desperately needs to step away from society for a while. A glimmer of hope flashes across Minerva's face as the clever prince suddenly reveals he has a perfect plan to ease her worried heart. Smiling with absolute confidence, Rufus promises his masterful solution will smoothly guide the situation to an outcome that everyone can happily accept. Staring up at the towering prince with wide eyes, an anxious Minerva earnestly wonders if he truly possesses the power to protect a girl whose entire world has just been destroyed. Holding Minerva's hand, Rufus states that there is something only she can do right now using a special prerogative reserved for the crown princess. He explains that she must formally appoint Sophie as her personal lady-in-waiting. Surprised by the proposal, Minerva repeats the suggestion while Sophie looks utterly stunned by the prospect. Rufus explains that the honorable position unlocks the doors to many palace settings, allowing Sophie to meet prominent figures without stepping into open society. He adds that this strategic move will both honor the Margrave's wish for new connections and ensure Sophie remains protected inside the palace walls. Ecstatic, Minerva begs Sophie to accept the role and startlingly pulls a blushing Rufus into a tight embrace. A wildly flustered Rufus tries to regain his composure while Roan playfully covers his eyes to give the couple privacy. Gathering himself, Rufus apologizes for getting carried away, admitting he desperately wanted some private time together since the recent chaos hardly felt like a pre-wedding trip. Blushing deeply, Minerva stares back at him while Roan teases the pure-hearted couple, prompting Rufus to sharply order the guard to forget everything he just heard. Clearing his throat, Rufus reminds them that it is almost time for the welcome banquet, urging Minerva to make her first Grey Ring social event count. He encourages her to show the nobles that a woman from a vassal land can confidently stand as an imperial prince's consort, to which Minerva firmly agrees. Entering the grand hall, Minerva steels her resolve to avoid stumbling, determined to be a flawless hostess just as a voice calls out to her. Nearby nobles eagerly gossip about the absent Lady Mia and House Dialem, marveling at how Lord Robert got involved with his fiancée's sister. As the scandalous whispers swirl through the crowd, a bright light shines down on the grand entrance. The herald officially announces the arrival of their highnesses Rufus and Lady Minerva, drawing the absolute attention of every noble in the room. Holding hands, Rufus and Minerva stride gracefully into the opulent banquet hall. The couple stands brilliantly together, radiating confidence and grace as the crowd watches in awe. Recalling Queen Olivia's advice to steady a room with a gentle stare instead of a glare, Minerva pours quiet strength into her gaze. Rufus watches her with pride as she executes the Asheran Queen's lesson perfectly, commanding respect without saying a single word. Turning to her new lady-in-waiting, Minerva warmly asks Sophie to smile and help her chat with the guests, promising to stay right by her side. Moved to tears by Minerva's unwavering support, Sophie's eyes shine with profound gratitude. High-ranking noblewomen eagerly approach to formally greet Lady Minerva, introducing members of their reading group. A flustered Sophie hastily gathers her composure to help introduce the esteemed guests. Watching Minerva gracefully steer the conversation away from Sophie, Rufus reflects that the role of hostess perfectly shifts the anxious girl's mindset. Unnoticed by the bustling crowd, Marcus keeps a vigilant, protective watch over Sophie from a distance. The attendees raise their glasses in a joyous toast, showering the radiant couple with praise and admiring how tenderly the notoriously cold prince looks at his bride. Suddenly, a visibly stressed Sophie excuses herself and swiftly leaves the room before collapsing heavily in the hallway. Discovering the exhausted girl, Minerva gently offers to settle Sophie in her own quarters so she can finally get some well-deserved rest. Safely inside the private room, Sophie praises Minerva's incredible strength and impossibly pure heart. Holding back tears, Sophie admits her heart is a total mess from the betrayal, and Minerva gently validates her shock by confessing she wasn't calm during her own ordeal either. Gazing up with a serene smile, Minerva offers to share the unimaginable trials she once lived through to comfort the heartbroken girl. Hoping to lift Sophie's spirits, Minerva vows to share even her ugliest memories with a warm, reassuring smile. As the night deepens, Minerva calmly pours wine and begins recounting her painful past. Lying beside her, Minerva concludes that although a lot happened, the pain eventually subsided and a beautiful new life opened up before her. Turning to Sophie with absolute certainty, Minerva promises that she too will build a wonderful life. Exhausted but comforted, the girls share a light-hearted moment as Minerva playfully asks Sophie to drop the stiff honorifics. Snuggling closer, Sophie warmly asks to just call her Minerva, eager to deepen their new bond. With a soft, genuine smile, Minerva happily agrees to the newfound closeness. The next morning, a visibly tired Rufus greets Minerva as she drags herself out of bed. Clutching her aching head, a thoroughly hungover Minerva tries to assure a concerned Rufus that she is perfectly fine despite looking absolutely awful. Rufus playfully orders coffee, noting he didn't peg Minerva for a drinker since she and a now hungover Sophie polished off 2 bottles of wine. Minerva cheerfully explains they both felt much lighter after venting their frustrations, prompting Rufus to ask what they discussed during their fun night. Minerva hesitates as Rufus smoothly guesses she was considering asking Sophie to be her lady-in-waiting to serve as an emotional crutch. Looking down nervously, Minerva confesses she feared a refusal and felt it was wrong to pressure Sophie on the same day her family betrayed her. Rufus casually questions if a born-and-bred Grey-ring noble would even want to serve a consort from a small vassal state. Startled by the reminder of her lower rank, Minerva nervously agrees that a refusal wouldn't be strange. A flustered Minerva stammers in denial as Rufus calmly notes that while he thinks a refusal is unlikely, she shouldn't force the issue. Bursting into the room with frantic energy, Sophie urges a startled Minerva to breathe while Minerva reassures her there is no pressure. Tears of pure joy stream down Sophie's face as she eagerly accepts the immense honor of serving as Minerva's lady-in-waiting. Minerva stares in absolute, wide-eyed shock as the reality of Sophie's heartfelt acceptance washes over her. Clutching her aching head, an energized Sophie declares she must rally and start packing immediately to help Minerva settle into Grey-ring. A gentle Rufus watches the flustered girls, instructing his aide to prepare a hangover remedy while noting that Sophie's new purpose has made her eager to move forward. 2 ornate chalices filled with a dark, bubbling remedy sit heavily on the table. Marcus cheerfully vouches for the fast-acting concoction, warning a trembling Sophie and a sweating Minerva that the rough-looking drink is quite bitter. Mustering her courage to step into her new future, a determined Sophie aggressively downs the entire bitter remedy in one massive gulp. With a brave shout, Minerva excitedly declares she will drink hers too so they can go together. Both girls shine with renewed energy, thrilled to find their heads and stomachs completely cleared as they celebrate their upcoming journey. A deeply relieved Minerva smiles warmly at Sophie, genuinely happy to see her newly appointed lady-in-waiting facing forward with a bright smile. Standing alone in the quiet corridor, a somber Rufus admits he still senses lingering sparks of unease surrounding Sophie's rapid recovery. He silently vows to fiercely protect her until she is completely and truly healed. In a grand ceremony filled with floating petals, Minerva officially appoints a graceful Sophie as her chief lady-in-waiting. The Margrave stares in absolute, sweating shock at the sudden revelation that his daughter has become Lady Minerva's top attendant. The overwhelmed Margrave deeply bows, sincerely thanking Minerva for bestowing such a glorious honor upon his daughter. Bending his head in shame, the Margrave bitterly takes the blame for Sophie's suffering and vows that the exposure of their secret passage will never happen again. A stern Rufus coldly reminds the Margrave that he will likely receive a reprimand from Emperor Tristan, ordering him to handle the passage's reconstruction swiftly. Turning his gaze back to Sophie, Rufus reassures the nervous father that he has personally judged her trustworthy and asks him to confidently leave her in their care. The grand estate doors stand tall as the formal group begins to make their graceful departure. A cheerful Roan notes that a fully thrilled Marcus will now have Miss Sophie serving Lady Minerva, completely deflating Marcus's attempt to act cool. A blushing Marcus fixes his hair while Roan smugly points out that Marcus obviously likes Sophie. Marcus frantically asks if he should change into a frilly outfit for a date, but an unimpressed Roan flatly tells him that frills are the absolute last thing that would suit him. Slamming a trunk closed, Marcus defensively snaps that he obviously knows frills won't work. Calming down, Marcus acknowledges that an earnest girl like Sophie won't jump into another romance, vowing to carefully guard her until she completely trusts him. A laughing Minerva offers to help Sophie pack while a highly flustered Marcus desperately yells at Roan to shut up about it being a date. The beautiful estate courtyard bustles with royal guards and carriages as Minerva gracefully descends the stairs to begin her journey. A luxurious carriage rolls smoothly down the sunlit, tree-lined path away from the Gilgren estate. Inside the carriage, an impressed Minerva praises Sophie for reading a highly useful book detailing the Grey Ring royals' formal rites. A somber Sophie admits she only hosted her reading circle because it was the one thing Mia hated and wouldn't try to steal, bitterly lamenting her failure as a proper sister. Minerva firmly interrupts her self-deprecation, urging Sophie to carry herself with pride and give herself more credit so people won't belittle her. Blushing fiercely, a flustered Sophie deflects by praising how amazing it is that the famously cold Prince Rufus dotes on Minerva so passionately. A recovering Sophie warmly predicts Minerva's married life will be wonderful, confessing that while she has no current interest in men, staying near such a happy couple might eventually make her want to fall in love again. Looking back affectionately, Minerva hopes Sophie finds someone wonderful who can eventually heal her wounded heart. Supported heavily by Sophie and Evan, Minerva enjoys a busy but incredibly meaningful journey to Grey Ring by land and sea. Arriving near the imposing imperial capital of Duarte, Rufus suggests they relax at the royal villa before officially heading to the palace. While Sophie praises Minerva's relentless studying, the future princess notes that preparing for the upcoming encounters with the major ducal houses keeps her mind sharp. An anxious Sophie nervously asks about the troubling rumors claiming the ducal ladies are absolutely furious with Minerva. Minerva calmly explains that the ducal daughters were raised specifically to marry royalty, making their resentment toward a suddenly chosen outsider completely understandable. Sophie nervously shares intel that the major houses, led by the specially trained Cassandra of House Mazer, have united to expel the foreign threat. Touched by Sophie's fierce promise to support her against the unfair backlash, Minerva warmly thanks her fiercely loyal friend. Feeling incredibly lucky to have such a passionate ally, Minerva is interrupted when her maids tell her to close her books for the main event. The smiling maids assure a confused, casually dressed Minerva that her attire is perfect and urge her to step outside. Pushing her forward alone, the maids tell her to slowly enjoy this precious, private moment before entering the strict confines of the capital. Stepping into the lush garden, a surprised Minerva finds Prince Rufus waiting for her outside an ornate tent. Flashing a handsome, gentle smile, Rufus asks if his sudden appearance surprised her. Taking her hand warmly, Rufus explains he wanted to use their final travel day to properly fulfill his promise of redoing his proposal. Admitting his struggle to find the perfect grand gesture, Rufus asks to offer her quiet comfort instead of a spectacle, which she happily accepts. Guiding her into the beautifully decorated tent, Rufus assures her that no one will bother them in their romantic little hideout. Noting her exhaustion, Rufus apologizes for the hectic travel schedule, but Minerva insists she knows it was all done for her sake. Chuckling that their aides constantly tell them both to rest, an anxious Minerva admits she is still extremely nervous about the upcoming palace rites. Pulling her gently into his lap, Rufus declares they should forever be the kind of partners who support each other whenever one is worn out. Wrapping his arms around her, the prince holds his beloved tightly against his chest in the quiet sanctuary. Slipping a beautiful ring onto her finger, Rufus swears his eternal love and protection, to which a deeply moved Minerva gladly accepts. Holding her hand, Rufus smiles tenderly as Minerva leans into his warm embrace with tears of absolute joy in her eyes. Suddenly, Minerva gasps softly in surprise as the prince leans in closer. Feeling her built-up fatigue completely melt away in his arms, Minerva gratefully accepts his offer to safely rest against him. Cradled securely in his embrace, she whispers her love for him as they share a peaceful, deeply romantic moment together. Approaching the massive, bustling capital of Duarte, a nervous Minerva wonders how the common people will actually react to her arrival. Gently calling her name, Rufus encourages his anxious bride to look out the window and wave to the massive crowds. A massive, cheering crowd lines the city streets, throwing confetti and warmly welcoming the new princess. Riding through the jubilant city, Minerva is left completely awestruck by the overwhelming outpouring of love and public support. Smiling radiantly, she waves back at the happy citizens who excitedly call out her name. Watching the grand parade, her brother notes that the heartwarming story of a small country girl finding happiness has successfully won over the Grey Ring public. The brothers optimistically discuss how their family's massive popularity in the empire will undoubtedly boost Ashland's tourism and global image. Watching Marcus attentively guard Sophie from the wind, Rufus notes their sudden closeness, to which Minerva warmly explains her brother has been her dedicated protector for weeks. A flustered Justin reminds the couple that they are not alone as Rufus leans close to Minerva in the carriage. Smirking slightly, Rufus teasingly justifies his public affection as a highly necessary measure to keep his bride safe. Looking out at the magnificent palace gates, the group prepares for Minerva to take the very first step into her grand new life. A grand assembly of royal servants and guards bow in deep, unified respect as the massive palace doors open before them. Inside the grand hall stands the absolute highest echelon of Grey Ring royalty, including the current emperor and Rufus's powerful parents. Trembling slightly under the weight of the moment, an overwhelmed Minerva mentally prepares to execute a flawless formal greeting. Taking her hand warmly, the Dowager Empress completely disarms Minerva's anxiety by thanking her for loving Rufus, proving she is just a mother who desperately wants her son to be happy. Prince Reginald happily greets Minerva with a massive bouquet he picked himself, warmly welcoming her to their home. A beaming Minerva gracefully thanks the young prince, noting that beautiful people deserve to be surrounded by beautiful flowers. An imposing older royal steps forward to greet her, expressing deep gratitude that she finally drew Rufus out from behind his thick emotional walls. Smiling warmly alongside her fiancé, Minerva humbly insists that she is the one who was truly saved when Rufus opened a new door for her. Gazing fondly at his brother, the older royal notes with absolute joy that Rufus looks happier than he ever has before. Acknowledging their fully packed schedule, he smoothly orders the staff to guide Minerva and her entourage to their private wing to unpack. The grand, sunlit exterior of the Jade Pavilion stands proudly ready to host the esteemed guests. Escorting them inside the lavish halls, Rufus explains that the lined-up staff members have loyally served him since childhood. A perfectly poised Minerva smiles brightly as she is introduced to head maid Melanie, head chef Thomas, and butler Parrish. The devoted staff pledges to serve her with all their hearts, allowing Minerva to practice Queen Olivia's lesson of always respecting those who serve you. With the formal introductions complete, Rufus leads the group through the Great Hall to begin a private tour of the pavilion's facilities. An overly excited Roan immediately points to the portrait gallery, begging to see the visual history of His Highness from childhood to age 20. A slightly embarrassed Rufus relents with a sigh, guiding a completely thrilled Minerva toward the gallery to see his past laid bare. The group steps into the massive, chandelier-lit corridor that serves as the Royal Portrait Gallery. Minerva gazes up in quiet, breathless awe at the towering paintings lining the ornate walls. She stops to stare deeply at a striking portrait capturing a much younger, incredibly solemn Rufus. A somber Rufus explains how his parents forced him to bottle up his emotions from a young age to avoid showing weakness while his frail brother secured the throne. Overwhelmed by the crushing tragedy of his lonely childhood, tears stream down Minerva's face as she softly calls his name. Gripped by profound affection, she tearfully confesses that she wishes she could have been by his side to comfort him when he was just a small boy. Reaching out to touch his shoulder, she tenderly notes that every version of him in those old portraits was simply waiting for someone to love him. Rufus smiles down at her with genuine, radiant warmth, completely touched by her fierce devotion. Wrapping a protective arm around his bride, the prince vows that he must give his absolute all for her happiness or risk being scolded by his younger selves. Continuing the tour, a delighted Minerva marvels at her beautiful new room, completely thrilled to discover she has a private garden right across from Sophie. Having safely delivered her to her quarters, Rufus smoothly excuses himself to clear some piled-up work with his brother Tristan before her afternoon tea. Later in the elegant parlor, an older noblewoman informs Minerva that her rigorous consort training will be handled by Lady Taylor. A nervous Minerva learns that Gwyneth Taylor is Greering's most famous and famously strict etiquette expert, though she supposedly harbors a kind heart. The formidable Gwyneth Taylor enters the room, projecting an aura of absolute, uncompromising authority. A perfectly composed Minerva and Sophie gracefully curtsy to welcome the legendary instructor. Lady Taylor politely congratulates the future bride, noting that since she knew Queen Olivia decades ago, Minerva's foundational Ashland training should be excellent. The stern instructor immediately lays down the law, fiercely declaring she will refine every single aspect of Minerva's demeanor and demanding absolute obedience. Promising to ruthlessly inspect her progress at tonight's dinner, Lady Taylor leaves a determined Minerva quietly swearing to nail whatever test comes her way. The grand, imposing exterior of the royal estate stands quietly under the evening sky. Inside a private sitting room, an exhausted Minerva regroups with her loyal companions to process the intense new training regimen. A highly frustrated Marcus rubs his temples, bitterly complaining that the insanely strict matron relentlessly criticized even his flawless guard manners. He aggressively mimics the old woman's harsh lecture about learning grace, deeply insulted that she dared to question the future Duke of House Bartnet. A sweating Roan eagerly chimes in, revealing Lady Taylor ruthlessly called him timid and warned he would only end up embarrassing his mistress. A serious Minerva admits the instructor's unyielding, scolding method is exactly why she is so unpopular despite finding no actual flaws in their behavior. Haunted by the brutal feedback, Minerva solemnly confesses she got cocky and was outright told she utterly lacked the dignity required for Prince Rufus's bride. Looking down in heavy defeat, she acknowledges the massive, intimidating wall standing between her current skills and the title of Greering's princess consort. In a vivid flashback, a sharp-eyed Lady Taylor slams a stack of books onto the desk, declaring that Queen Olivia's old-fashioned teachings must be completely modernized. Sternly demanding absolute perfection, Mrs. Taylor reprimands Minerva's finger placement and warns that she will never survive in Greering without flawless etiquette. Although the strict tutor only gives her a barely passing mark, she orders Minerva to practice straightening up with far more dignity in traditional royal dress. Utterly exhausted from the grueling etiquette lessons, Minerva lets out a heavy sigh as soon as her tutor leaves the room. A deeply concerned Sophie suggests asking Prince Rufus to intervene, noting that Mrs. Taylor is being far too strict even for her usual standards. Smiling through her fatigue, Minerva declines the offer, explaining that the tutor's relentless standards are actually helping her level up her patience and self-control. Gathering her composure, a determined Minerva practices sitting with absolute, unyielding royal grace. Watching her friend push herself to the brink of exhaustion, Sophie can only stare in silent admiration. Excusing herself quietly, Sophie steps out of the room to fetch some well-deserved refreshments for the hard-working future consort. A palace servant soon arrives with a stack of newly delivered letters for both Lady Minerva and Lady Sophie. Glancing at her own pile, Minerva quickly decides she must decline all social invitations until after the official engagement ceremony. Trembling slightly, a deeply anxious Sophie stares at a letter from her father and dreads that it might contain news about her treacherous ex-fiancé, Robert. The next morning, a refreshed Minerva and Sophie greet their loyal guard Evan in a courtyard that has been beautifully transformed into a lush herb garden. Settling into her new life in the imperial capital of Duarte, Minerva spends every single day enduring Mrs. Taylor's rigorous lessons to become a worthy consort. Stepping onto the courtyard stones, Minerva asks Evan to run her through her daily Ryute martial arts forms while Sophie watches closely. Executing her forms flawlessly, Minerva happily notes that the rigorous core training has drastically improved her stamina, focus, and physical senses. She realizes that her newfound stamina will perfectly support her clairvoyance, which requires intense focus far beyond just holding the magical ring catalyst. Looking warmly at her companion, Minerva reflects on how Sophie bravely chose to become her lady-in-waiting after suffering a devastating betrayal by her own sister and fiancé. Minerva's heart aches for Sophie, knowing the recent letter revealed that Robert showed absolutely no remorse and ruthlessly blamed his infidelity on her sister's seduction. Snapping her back to reality, Evan reminds Minerva that they must wrap up their morning training to prepare for the massive parade welcoming the Ashland delegation. Recalling Mrs. Taylor's sharp criticism, Minerva remembers how the tutor scolded her for lazily relying on trendy fashion rather than curating a truly commanding presence. Staring decisively at her wardrobe, Minerva completely understands the profound lesson behind her strict tutor's harsh words. Determined to project the same unyielding charisma as the Empress Dowagers, Minerva confidently selects a dress that honors her own unique history. Embracing her painful 10 years in Ashland and the beautiful moment she met Rufus, Minerva vows to wear her entire journey proudly on her skin. Radiating absolute elegance, Minerva stands before her mirrors in a breathtakingly revitalized gown. The attending maids gasp in sheer awe as they take in her stunning, regal transformation. A wide-eyed Sophie praises her cool and poised aura, instantly recognizing the gown as the very same dress Minerva wore the day she first met Prince Rufus. Smiling brightly, Minerva explains she had the historically bitter dress retailored and paired with Queen Olivia's hairpiece to forge her painful memories into undeniable strength. Marching into the room for a final inspection, a stern Mrs. Taylor prepares to scrutinize the future consort from top to bottom. Surprising everyone, Mrs. Taylor awards her a passing grade but sharply warns Minerva that a true consort must chase absolute perfection for the rest of her life. Moved by the rare compliment, Minerva tells the newly smiling tutor that she hopes to transform all her bitter memories into enduring beauty and strength just like her. Blushing slightly at the praise, Mrs. Taylor quickly clears her throat and pivots her intensely strict gaze directly onto a nervous Sophie. Declaring Sophie's neckline too bare, Mrs. Taylor orders the maids to gather the girl's hair and fetch a silk scarf to properly amplify her presence as a royal lady-in-waiting. A flustered maid searches the accessory drawers frantically, apologizing that she cannot find any scarves in their usual designated storage spot. Without missing a beat, Minerva effortlessly calls out the scarf's exact location on a hidden shelf, leaving the maids utterly astounded by her impossibly precise memory. Winking playfully at a bewildered Sophie, Minerva secretly promises to teach her the clairvoyant trick later. Looking proudly at the two beautifully styled young women, Mrs. Taylor declares them more than ready to completely enchant the massive parade crowd waiting outside. The magnificent, sprawling architecture of the Grey Ring Imperial Palace gleams brilliantly under the morning sun. Stepping into the Grand Hall, Prince Rufus freezes in his tracks, utterly mesmerized by the breathtaking sight of his beautiful bride. Blushing softly, Minerva confesses she re-dyed the dress from their first meeting because he loved her in it, to which a completely captivated Rufus struggles to find words. The heartwarming moment is beautifully interrupted when the Emperor and Dowager Empress step forward to joyfully praise both Minerva and Sophie for looking absolutely splendid. Steeling herself for the grand debut, Minerva listens intently as Lady Taylor insists her outfit will help her endure the intense judgment of the gathered nobles. An impressive Ashland delegation marches proudly through the city, displaying a rich dowry before finally arriving at Duart's amphitheater. Representing the first vassal state bride in 5 centuries, the grand procession faces the scrutinizing public as former Emperor Glenwill and his consort step forward to greet the couple. High society aristocrats pack the theater stands, buzzing with anticipation as they look down upon the magnificent royal gathering. Reminding her that confidence makes a person shine, Lady Taylor proudly observes the nobles murmuring in awe at the stunning sight of Minerva. Despite her composed exterior, Minerva suddenly feels the sharp, oppressive weight of hostile stares piercing her from a VIP box. She locks eyes with Cassandra Miser, a blue-blooded duke's daughter who sits as the focal point for all the ladies fiercely opposing a vassal-born consort. Refusing to let her engage in a petty stare-down, Rufus gently commands Minerva to look his way instead and carry herself as the future princess consort. Leaning in with absolute devotion, the handsome prince smoothly confesses that he honestly doesn't want her looking away from him for even a second. A deep blush spreads across Minerva's cheeks as she softly breathes his name, completely captivated by his unwavering affection. Watching the romantic display from afar, a sweating Roan playfully notes he can almost hear the jealous lady's internal screams while hoping no one faints. The tense atmosphere shatters as traditional Ashland classical music echoes through the air, signaling the arrival of Minerva's protective brothers. Justin and Colin make a breathtaking entrance on horseback, their ceremonial uniforms gleaming brilliantly under the stadium lights. The amphitheater erupts in thunderous applause as the imposing Ashland Knights ride proudly through the cheering crowd. Marveling at their overwhelming presence, Marcus notes that Justin carries the bearing of a true king while Colin commands the absolute authority of a chancellor. The former emperor and his consort joyfully praise the magnificent horses and the deeply traditional Ashland antiquities on display. Recognizing the priceless treasures as King Keenan's private collection, a deeply moved Minerva realizes the monarch gave up his prized possessions to help secure her new life. Marcus watches in awe as Justin throws the full weight of his royal power behind his sister to ensure she is universally respected. Drawing his blade with practiced elegance, Justin commands the stage and begins the mesmerizing, traditional Ashland sword dance. Minerva warmly thanks Rufus for meeting her brother's sincerity, prompting the prince to humbly praise Justin's fierce resolve to protect his family. The former emperor excitedly shouts his supreme approval of the performance while a grateful Minerva silently thanks her brothers for putting the imperial family at ease. Rushing into the grand hallway, an excited Sophie eagerly calls out to Justin and Colin as they arrive at the estate. Justin warmly notes how happy and radiant his sister looks before Minerva proudly steps forward to introduce her new lady-in-waiting. Greeting the Marquis's eldest daughter, Justin politely hopes his highly competitive and stubborn sister hasn't caused her too much trouble. Smiling with pure adoration, Sophie earnestly declares she is constantly saved by Minerva's strength and will thank God forever for letting them meet. Stepping up smoothly, Colin introduces himself as the third brother, charmingly noting he has heard all about Sophie's diligent nature through letters. Roan enthusiastically blurts out that the gorgeous Sophie is entirely devoted to serving Minerva for life, leaving a panicking Marcus to desperately backtrack his own poor phrasing. Standing utterly confused, a bewildered Colin asks why Marcus and Roan are suddenly freaking out over a simple introduction. Shifting her focus back to their royal duties, Minerva asks Rufus what awaits them next on their incredibly packed schedule. Rufus explains that starting tomorrow, they will spend 5 strict days isolated in the palace shrine for a traditional purification period. Kneeling solemnly in their pristine white robes, the devoted couple peacefully receives the priest's blessing within the sunlit sanctuary. Returning home after a long absence, Minerva happily greets Sophie and her mother as they eagerly welcome her back to the estate. Her mother excitedly shares that she completely bonded with Sophie over their shared love of gardening, praising the young lady's remarkable horticultural knowledge. She further reveals that the estate has been swarmed by a horde of eager dress designers while Minerva was out. A beaming Sophie explains that Minerva's stunning parade outfit sparked a massive trend, forcing Lady Taylor to aggressively interview tailors fighting to become her exclusive designer. Running down the rest of the household's activities, Sophie reports that Justin and Marcus are sparring with the knights while Colin plans to study in the library. Utterly overwhelmed by how incredibly active everyone has been, an exhausted Minerva can only let out a breathless gasp of amazement. Realizing her husband is going hunting with the former emperor, Minerva's mother worries that Sophie will be left entirely alone tomorrow. Ignoring Sophie's polite insistence that she doesn't need to go out of her way, Minerva firmly promises to return to the estate for tea. Flashing a bright, genuine smile, Minerva insists she truly missed Sophie and promises to bring delicious sweets for their reunion. A grand palace stands quietly under the bright morning sky on the second day of the purification period. Prince Rufus checks on a visibly tense Minerva, who quickly assures him she is fine and only anxious because she promised to return to Sophie early. Hurrying through the halls after a long lecture, Minerva feels a sudden, sharp premonition that something is terribly wrong. Bursting through the heavy doors, a breathless Minerva announces her return and hastily apologizes to Sophie for being late. An untouched tea set sits quietly on the table, alongside a completely abandoned plate of sweets. Looking around the completely empty room, a highly confused Minerva softly calls out her lady-in-waiting's name. A maid informs her that Sophie went to the central hall, prompting Minerva to realize her highly responsible friend would never willingly miss their agreed time. A deeply concerned Minerva urgently asks the maid who exactly came to visit the estate. The maid explains that a noble lady dropped off a calling card that caused Sophie to rush out in a panic, leaving Minerva and Rufus thoroughly alarmed. Minerva instantly suspects the arrogant duke's daughter, Cassandra, and her powerful clique of elite noblewomen. She quickly pieces together that Cassandra's proud inner circle is targeting Sophie solely because they bitterly despise the idea of a vassal-born consort. Trembling at the thought of them emotionally breaking Sophie, Minerva begins to panic until Rufus gently places a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Gazing at her warmly, the imperial prince encourages his anxious bride to lean on him and let him fulfill his duty as her supportive fiancé. Rufus smoothly turns his attention to the stern Mrs. Taylor, acknowledging that a proper consort must remain composed in any crisis. Mrs. Taylor shrewdly deduces that the bitter noblewomen specifically targeted the vulnerable lady-in-waiting to safely strike at Minerva's growing royal favor. Minerva realizes that the cruel nobles are deliberately using her mandated purification absence as the perfect opening to emotionally ambush her friend. Agreeing that a forced defection would devastate Minerva, Mrs. Taylor watches as the desperate princess laments not knowing where to find them in the massive central hall. Grabbing her hand, Rufus confidently reminds Minerva that she can easily locate Sophie by using her newly awakened clairvoyant abilities. Her eyes widening with hopeful determination, Minerva thanks Rufus and prepares to use her powers without a single moment of hesitation. Flashing a knowing smile, the imperial prince politely asks Mrs. Taylor to contain her surprise as Minerva prepares to unleash her magic. Remaining perfectly unbothered, the veteran tutor claims she has seen plenty of unfathomable gifts during her 30 years of training royal ladies. Focusing intensely on the feathered pen Sophie recently used, Minerva confidently activates her sensory magic. Spotting the central hall instantly, an impressed Minerva credits her rigorous martial arts training for making her magical vision significantly faster and sharper. A perfectly brewed cup of tea steams quietly in an ornate, sunlit parlor. A highly tense Sophie sits stiffly at a grand table surrounded entirely by intimidating, high-born noblewomen. The three elite daughters glare down at their trapped guest with overwhelmingly smug and judgmental expressions. Cassandra, flanked by the daughters of House Cameron and Moran, cheerfully gloats about finally cornering the isolated lady-in-waiting. Falsely playing the sweet friend, Cassandra implies that native highborn ladies should stick together to defeat a lowly foreigner like Minerva. When Cassandra invites her to an exclusive upcoming tea party, a nervous Sophie politely attempts to defer to Lady Minerva's schedule. Smiling venomously, Cassandra strictly clarifies that the invitation excludes Minerva entirely, sneering that mixed-background foreigners simply make proper nobles uneasy. Another smug noblewoman falsely accuses the vassal-born Minerva of unethically overworking Sophie without ever granting her a single day off. Clenching her fists, Sophie fiercely defends her mistress, insisting that she willingly chooses to spend all her time serving Lady Minerva. The cruel trio completely ignores her defense, bitterly mocking Minerva as a formerly disgraced Ashland outcast who is merely overexcited about her new royal status. Smiling with absolute malice, Cassandra makes it utterly clear that she does not care about the truth at all. Cassandra twists the knife deeper, loudly questioning if Lady Minerva even cares about her own attendant's exhausted appearance. Sophie stares back in horrified silence as the vicious psychological assault continues unabated. Watching the cruel interrogation through her mind's eye, a heartbroken Minerva realizes her constant reliance on Sophie inadvertently painted her as a tyrannical mistress. Feigning pity, the noblewomen claim they were absolutely heartbroken to see a highborn girl reduced to serving a commoner. Sipping her tea, Cassandra vilely accuses Minerva of exploiting Sophie's shattered pride immediately after her devastating family betrayal. As Sophie desperately shouts that Lady Minerva would never prey on weakness, Cassandra coldly counters that a true consort would have simply chosen a capable highborn girl instead. Questioning Sophie's loyalty, Cassandra points out that high nobles find it unbearably arrogant for a vassal-born like Minerva to make a marquis's daughter her attendant. Cassandra watches with a haughty smile as Sophie sits before her with a bowed head at the tea table. Blaming herself, a distressed Sophie murmurs apologies for hurting Minerva's standing by becoming a lady-in-waiting without considering the optics. Leaning in with feigned sympathy, Cassandra insists they cannot stand by while Sophie suffers, warning that this situation will only bring slander to both women. Pressing her advantage, she explains that most ducal houses will never accept Minerva and that House Gilgren will stand against the dukes as long as Sophie serves her. Back at the palace, a tense Rufus acknowledges that even he knows how the dukes view his bride hailing from a vassal state. Offering false support under the guise of friendship, the noblewomen corner Sophie, urging her to resign immediately and stay away from Minerva. Watching the manipulation unfold through her clairvoyance, Minerva gasps as her friend is trapped by their venomous words. Bursting into the room, a panicked Marcus reports that Jade Pavilion guards tipped him off about Sophie being summoned and disappearing. As Marcus prepares to intervene, Mrs. Taylor stops him, warning that stepping in will label Minerva as too weak to stand alone and that the lady-in-waiting must handle this herself. Frustrated by the strict non-interference rule, Minerva grits her teeth, realizing they are relentlessly cornering the very friend she brought to the palace to protect. Reaching out toward her vision, Minerva vows she won't forgive anyone who hurts her friend, desperate to fulfill her promise to keep Sophie safe despite Mrs. Taylor's orders. Continuing her psychological assault, Cassandra tells Sophie it is the right thing to do and that she doesn't need to feel guilty about resigning. Unable to watch any longer, Minerva tightly shuts her eyes and fiercely shouts her absolute refusal. A sudden, blinding burst of magical energy erupts from Minerva, leaving Rufus stunned as he questions what is happening to his fiancée. Glowing with radiant light, Minerva stands in awe of a razor-sharp power she has never felt before. Her eyes snap open, shimmering with a profound and newly awakened magical clarity. Across the palace, a tearful Sophie resolves that she must handle this alone, completely unaware of the immense magic awakening to save her. Watching specks of light gather in her hands, Minerva realizes with shock that Sophie's inner voice is flowing straight into her head. Hearing Sophie internally berate herself for wavering and feeling pathetic, Minerva grasps the true depth of her attendant's despair. Sensing a deeper power awakening, Minerva tells Rufus she is feeling Sophie's heart and hopes to establish a direct link to speak with her. Despite fearing rejection because she kept her ability a secret, Minerva refuses to hesitate and desperately calls out to Sophie's mind. Startled by the sudden voice in her head, Sophie wonders if she is hallucinating until Minerva firmly reassures her that it is real. Tears well up in Sophie's eyes as she questions if the voice truly belongs to her beloved mistress. Watching Sophie react from afar, Rufus and the others are astounded that Minerva's potential has manifested as actual telepathy. Through their mental link, Minerva gently commands her friend to breathe and settle herself first. Promising to explain everything with no secrets later, Minerva asks Sophie to accept the telepathic connection born from her deep desire to help. Comforted by the invisible presence beside her, Sophie places her trust in Minerva and finds profound calm in their shared connection. A warm smile breaks across Sophie's face as she softly thanks Minerva for her unwavering support. Completely unaware of the telepathic exchange, Cassandra is left confused when Sophie suddenly speaks up to apologize to Minerva. Minerva reassures her not to fret over their brute tactics, while Sophie admits she chose this path and swore her future to her mistress. Acknowledging that wanting to run isn't shameful, Minerva confesses she wants to pull Sophie out of that room immediately. Hearing that she is allowed to run, Sophie realizes that fleeing would only give Cassandra the power to drag Minerva down further. Refusing to let House Gilgren be wounded any longer, Sophie resolves that she still has far to go to stand proudly as the imperial consort's attendant. Drawing strength from the memory of Minerva's unyielding resilience during her worst struggles, Sophie tightens her fists with renewed determination. Declaring that she is done being weak, Sophie vows she will not run and will continue serving as Minerva's dedicated lady-in-waiting. Minerva watches with deep pride and emotion as Sophie embraces her inner courage. Back in the room, Rufus steps forward with fierce determination, declaring he will end this now to teach them that no one lays a hand on Minerva. Oblivious to Sophie's newfound resolve to fight back, Cassandra patronizingly offers false friendship and mocks her silence. A commanding voice cuts through the tension, coldly telling Lady Cassandra to say nothing more and asking if she isn't overstepping. A noblewoman leaps from her seat in outrage, questioning if Sophie completely misunderstands Lady Cassandra's true intent. She furiously demands gratitude, declaring Cassandra kindly offered an escape rather than shaming a margrave's daughter for serving a vassal-born mistress. Sophie narrows her eyes, her gaze hardening into a fierce glare of unbreakable resolve. Sophie fiercely declares her lifelong bond with Minerva, refusing the tea invitation unless her mistress is included. Cassandra scoffs at the insolence but quickly changes the subject to the impending wedding preparations between Prince Rufus and Minerva. Observing through her vision, Minerva marvels at Sophie's steady strength under pressure, realizing she possesses a charisma her attackers utterly lack. Standing her ground, Sophie proudly claims her role as closest aide is the highest post a woman can hold, reminding them Minerva's brother will be Ashland's king. Cassandra's face contorts with dark malice, commanding the mere Margrave's girl to show some respect. Spectators watch the intense standoff, whispering in awe at Sophie's surprising ferocity. Marcus observes in pure admiration, noting that beneath Sophie's gentle modesty runs a deep steel that makes the other ladies look like nothing. Cassandra patronizingly compliments Sophie's hidden backbone, while Sophie firmly vows to stand with Minerva no matter who she crosses. Moved to tears by the display of loyalty, Minerva proudly calls Sophie her friend as the aide swears to devote her life to protecting her mistress. Feigning defeat, Cassandra smiles condescendingly and accepts Sophie's stubborn decision to remain a lady-in-waiting. Just as the tension seems to break, Cassandra cruelly twists the knife by delivering sudden news about Sophie's former fiancé, Lord Robert. She reveals the Duke's plan to back the DRM heir, framing Robert as a victim with no objective proof of wrongdoing while blaming Sophie's sister Mia. Mocking Sophie's past friendship, Cassandra taunts that Robert will soon return with the full backing of several powerful dukes once his censure ends. She sneers that with ducal support, not even Prince Rufus or Minerva can stop Robert's return or his relentless obsession with marrying Sophie. Furious at the vile psychological attack, Minerva and Marcus erupt in sheer disgust at Cassandra for weaponizing Robert's name. Rufus calmly reassures Minerva that he and the Margrave have leads to indict Robert soon, prompting Minerva to mentally transmit this crucial hope. Minerva turns to Rufus, her eyes shining with profound gratitude for his unwavering support. Channeling her power, Minerva projects her voice into Sophie's mind, urging her to hold strong because Robert's dark deeds will soon be completely exposed. Finding irony in the messy past that led her here, Sophie smiles gracefully and silently sends her thanks to Minerva and Prince Rufus. Sophie coldly cuts the conversation short, declaring that threats hold no power over her and she lacks their terrible amount of free time. Cassandra turns away in bitter defeat, shooting a final ominous warning for Sophie not to regret her choice as her entourage prepares to leave. The hostile noblewomen finally exit the hall in a dramatic sweep of their dresses, leaving Sophie standing tall with a polite farewell. The heavy double doors slam shut, instantly shattering the suffocating tension that filled the room. Exhausted and completely wiped, Sophie mentally thanks Minerva, humbly crediting her mistress as the true source of her enduring strength. Mrs. Taylor praises Sophie's flawless poise, while a thrilled Marcus celebrates her absolute badassery during the intense confrontation. Overcome by a sudden surge of emotion, Marcus desperately charges out of the room to reach Sophie's side. Marcus bursts through the doors in a frantic panic just as Minerva warns Sophie of his rapid approach. Startled by the loud entrance, Sophie turns around and softly breathes his name in surprise. Marcus stands breathless before her, tightly clenching his fist as he tries to process his overwhelming relief. He passionately thanks her for fighting so bravely to protect herself and Minerva against such overwhelming odds. A beautiful, radiant blush blossoms on Sophie's face as she beams with pure joy at his heartfelt words. Through their lingering connection, Minerva feels the warm, familiar emotions linking Marcus and Sophie's hearts together. Watching Marcus fall completely head over heels, the observers humorously confirm the undeniable spark of true love between the pair. A voice suddenly calls out to Minerva, breaking her focus on the heartwarming scene unfolding in the central hall. Without warning, Minerva's strength vanishes, and she collapses backward as her consciousness violently fades into darkness. Chaos erupts in the room as a panicked Rufus desperately lunges forward to catch his falling fiancée before she hits the ground. Catching her lifeless body in his arms, a terrified Rufus screams Minerva's name in pure, unadulterated panic. Drifting in darkness, Minerva groggily recalled Sophie standing strong against the ducal ladies before their telepathic connection suddenly overwhelmed her. A distant, concerned voice pierced through the void, desperately calling out Minerva's name. Blinking her eyes open, she found an anxious Sophie leaning over her bed, visibly relieved to see her awake. Sophie gently urged the exhausted Minerva to stay down, assuring her that resting was far more important than worrying about the time. Explaining that using her power for the first time had completely drained her, Sophie revealed that Rufus and Roan had already explained her telepathic abilities. Tears welling in her eyes, Sophie emotionally asked why Minerva would push herself to such dangerous limits just for her. Smiling softly, Minerva replied without hesitation that Sophie was her most important friend in the entire world. Minerva confessed that her clairvoyance normally only worked one way, and she had only recently discovered she possessed such a rare gift. Apologizing for keeping it a secret out of fear that it might seem creepy, she explained that her fierce need to protect Sophie must have triggered the two-way connection. Shaking her head emphatically, Sophie passionately declared that Minerva's ability was amazing and not creepy in the slightest. Radiating pure gratitude, Sophie admitted her heart had never felt so full and thanked the gods for granting her mistress such a wondrous gift. Remembering Roan's words about telepathy requiring a deep bond, Minerva proudly attributed their successful link to the sheer strength of their friendship. Overcome with relief, Minerva gently thanked her loyal friend for so readily accepting her secret and her power. Nodding with renewed determination, Sophie prepared to take charge of her mistress's recovery. Handing over a tonic prepared by Evan, Sophie strictly ordered Minerva to drink it all and rest while she went to inform the others. Sophie explained that a reluctant Rufus had left to attend his duties so Minerva wouldn't worry, but promised to summon him immediately. Left alone for a moment, Minerva lay back and silently absorbed the deep warmth of everyone's unwavering concern. Bursting into the room with breathless urgency, Rufus quickly asked if she was all right while Minerva softly apologized for causing him such worry. Roan and Evan hurried in right behind the prince, their faces lighting up with immense relief at seeing Minerva finally awake. Wanting to give the couple some desperately needed privacy, Evan tactfully announced they would see the visitors out and leave the rest to His Highness. Placing his sister's care in the prince's hands, Roan warmly told Minerva to rest her heart and body while they waited in the next room. Sitting beside her, a worried Rufus gently asked how she felt, to which Minerva admitted she wasn't perfect but was feeling much better. Confessing his terrifying fear that she might never wake, Rufus revealed he had wanted to stay by her side the entire time she was in her deep sleep. Looking at her with fierce devotion, Rufus firmly declared that it was his absolute duty to protect her from any harm. A dark, blazing anger filled Rufus's eyes as he vowed that the ducal ladies who insulted her would soon learn what his true wrath looked like. Sensing the terrifying weight of his fury, Minerva realized she hadn't seen Rufus this enraged since Celica's disastrous tea party. Knowing she held a special place in his heart, Minerva worried about the devastating consequences if the prince unleashed his immense power in pure anger. She carefully reasoned with him, warning that directly attacking the powerful ducal houses now would only make them hate her before they even met. Though they could theoretically act on Sophie's first-hand report of the insults, Minerva hesitated to use her friend's suffering as political ammunition. Firmly prioritizing her attendants' well-being over her own honor, Minerva adamantly refused to let Sophie take the hit for their retaliation. Softening his gaze, Rufus gently reminded her that her feelings and judgment would always matter the most to him. Promising to be both her weapon and her shield, he agreed that true wisdom sometimes meant hesitating to strike back with raw power. Smiling warmly at his understanding, Minerva thanked him and agreed that possessing immense power meant they had to use it all the more wisely. Acknowledging that her vassal state origins would inevitably bring pain, Minerva bravely admitted she had fully braced herself for this before leaving Ashland. Remembering her own sister's cruelties, she empathized with the proud ducal ladies, understanding why they felt humiliated being placed beneath a lower-ranked woman. Refusing to be defined by her origins, Minerva vowed to work tirelessly to earn their respect and prove who she truly was. Chuckling fondly at her unwavering resolve, Rufus admitted he had suspected she would say exactly that. He agreed to hold back his revenge on the ducal houses for now, though he confessed he could never truly forgive them for hurting her. Promising to lend his power by force if they ever ran out of options, Rufus smiled as Minerva thanked him, cementing that their lives were truly one. Glancing at the window as the tension finally broke, a relaxed Minerva realized how late it had gotten and noted they had completely missed dinner. A maid leaves the room as Rufus sits beside Minerva's bed, gently instructing her to eat well and sleep deep. Startled by his teasing, Minerva asks how he plans to spoil her, to which Rufus firmly replies that it's his job to fuss over her since she overdid it. Taking matters into his own hands, Rufus carefully scoops up a spoonful of warm food and prepares to feed his flustered fiancée. Smiling warmly, Rufus holds the spoon out to Minerva and playfully tells her to say, blushing furiously at being fed, Minerva protests, but Rufus insists on doing at least this much because he was worried sick. Flustered by his dazzling smile, Minerva stammers nervously while realizing he is still a little mad about her reckless behavior. Holding the spoon steady, Rufus gently urges a highly embarrassed Minerva to open her mouth and accept the food. Blushing deeply with a tiny sweat drop, Minerva leans forward and finally takes a small bite from the silver spoon. Rufus smiles affectionately as he carefully feeds the embarrassed but compliant Minerva in her grand bed. A relieved Rufus beams brightly and promises just one more bite while Minerva watches him with a soft, affectionate gaze. A breathtaking view of the grand palace marks the passage of time, symbolizing the many lessons and faces Minerva encountered leading up to this fateful day. Standing before a mirror in a gorgeous gown, Minerva realizes today isn't the end, but the beautiful beginning of her new life. Minerva reflects on the arrival of her betrothal ceremony to Rufus, looking absolutely stunning in her elegant regal dress. Brushing off sentimentality, Mrs. Taylor reminds her that the upcoming wedding will be a massive global event requiring intense preparation. Fixing Minerva with a stern gaze, the instructor demands her full attention before she steps out to face the world. The strict tutor reminds Minerva that despite mastering the ceremony, she must perform perfectly because grayling blood doesn't run in her veins. Gracefully lifting her dress, Minerva thanks Sophie and Mrs. Taylor for their unwavering support and asks them to keep pushing her to fulfill her imperial duties. Minerva admits with a serene smile that the prior incident with the ducal ladies finally made her understand the intense world she is stepping into. Recalling Minerva's persistence, the strict tutor notes that her rigorous training might still leave the young lady running to Rufus in tears. Mrs. Taylor implies that Minerva should utilize her shared schooling to win over the influential alumni as powerful allies in society. The instructor warns that even her own alumni won't offer support unless they find Minerva genuinely promising on her own merits. Smiling with rare warmth, Mrs. Taylor proudly states she trusts no one will question her suitability as a tutor when Minerva finally steps into high society. Realizing the hidden compliment, a surprised Minerva asks if Mrs. Taylor is acknowledging her potential, prompting a coy deflection from the older woman. Roan and Evan praise Minerva's stunning appearance, noting that His Highness Rufus is surely waiting with his neck outstretched for his radiant bride. Approaching the massive double doors, Minerva's heart races as she catches sight of Rufus's imposing silhouette waiting just beyond the threshold. Dressed in brilliant ceremonial attire, an anxious Rufus turns around to finally lay eyes on his beautiful betrothed. The couple stands face to face in their majestic matching garments, softly breathing each other's names in a moment of pure awe. Captivated by her dazzling and assured presence, Rufus mentally admits that her breathtaking beauty leaves him completely speechless. Marcus trembles with overwhelming emotion, trying to hold back his tears as he beholds his stunning sister. The brothers joyfully celebrate Minerva's stunning look, reminding a tearful Marcus to keep it together before the imperial couples. The former emperor notes Rufus's dazzled expression, playfully warning him that taking the Bartnet family's precious apple requires total commitment. The former empress smiles warmly, finding it endearing to see the earnest young prince look his age and shed easy tears on such a momentous day. The current emperor confidently urges Minerva forward, trusting her to show her full potential as the grand cathedral doors open. Gripping her hand tightly, Rufus confesses his hands are shaking for the first time, not from fear, but from profound joy. As they prepare to walk down the grand aisle, Minerva fondly recalls the very first day this incredible man appeared before her. Leaning against him, Minerva cherishes his stern but endearing nature, completely captivated by his straight, devoted, and incredibly sweet heart. Gazing at her with boundless affection, Rufus gently declares that he loves absolutely every bit of her. Rufus hands her a glowing, magical charm filled with all his love, leaving Minerva's heart feeling profoundly warm and at peace. Basking in the radiant light of their future, they acknowledge that their lives alone have ended and their true life together finally begins. The massive cathedral doors swing wide open, revealing a breathtaking, sunlit altar and a stunned crowd turning to witness the royal couple's grand entrance. The crowd gasps in shock, questioning if the couple is making a strict vow as they notice the striking black celebratory bands. Minerva deeply understands the heavy weight of the black band being placed around her neck for the betrothal. Smiling warmly, the high priest bestows the sacred bands, praying that their love will endure before the formal ceremony begins. Blessings of unfading love are solemnly bestowed upon Rufus Valentine Greyring and Minerva Bartnet. When the couple firmly accepts, a noblewoman gasps in shock, asking if they truly understand the immense weight of choosing black. Rufus acknowledges the danger of ambitious rivals exploiting his brother's health, explaining they chose black to symbolize a lifelong, unbreakable vow to a single person. By swearing to seek only a vassal state bride with a black band, Rufus brilliantly declares he holds no ambitions for the throne, effectively blocking anyone trying to force their daughters between them. A realization ripples through the attendees as they understand that Minerva's lower birth actually shields Grey Ring from succession wars and secures the empire. The betrothal rite officially begins, leaving the nobles to grapple with the profound gravity of a vow sworn in black before God. Walking down the aisle, Minerva still feels the piercing stares of spite and envy from the surrounding nobles. Despite the hostility, she draws strength from the warm gazes of kind nobles they met on their journey and the steady ties forged with Sophie's family. She catches the glaring, bitter eyes of Lady Cassandra and her elite circle of noble daughters. While Minerva refuses to forgive what they did to Sophie, she secretly vows to reach them someday and forge true bonds. The couple stands before the glowing altar for the most crucial act of the ceremony, the blending of sands. To announce their betrothal to God and their ancestors, they prepare to mix the sand of Minerva's homeland, Ashland, with the sand of the Grey Ring Imperial Palace. As the two sands intertwine in the chalice, they silently declare the end of their solitary lives and the beginning of their shared destiny. Pouring the final holy sand, the priest seals their vows by divine order, while Rufus proudly declares Minerva his fated and worthy consort. Rufus proclaims that the black bands signify their unshakable resolve to support the emperor and forge a powerful alliance for the nation's rise. Embracing the heavy weight of her duty, Minerva vows to stand by Rufus under any circumstance and be the absolute pride of Grey Ring's people. Turning to the honored guests, Minerva boldly asks them to stand as guarantors and lend their applause if they trust she is worthy. Determined to let the nation truly know her, she readies herself to face every single noble directly and without fear. The grand hall erupts in roaring applause as the attendees rise to their feet, honoring the newly betrothed couple. Leaving the clapping nobles behind, Rufus gently guides Minerva toward the balcony to face the waiting public. The heavy doors fly open to reveal a massive, cheering crowd of citizens gathered below to celebrate their prince. Awestruck by the breathtaking sight, Minerva tells Rufus she wants to meet the people and know everything about his country. Bathed in radiant sunlight, Rufus assures her that the people of Grey Ring will welcome her with all their hearts. Back inside, an elderly servant wipes away tears of immense joy, deeply moved to see the young master so genuinely happy. Minerva smiles warmly as she learns of the tradition to hold a private night party to thank the loyal servants who couldn't attend the formal ceremony. Surrounded by her beaming parents and brothers, Minerva is praised for her impeccable conduct and showered with familial pride. As the guests celebrate the beautiful ceremony, a young noble playfully declares it's about time he finds a partner to match the couple's happiness. The festive atmosphere shifts slightly when the Marquis of Gilgarin is formally announced, arriving to speak with Emperor Tristan and Prince Rufus. Sophie rushes to her father with immense relief, confessing she only endured the recent trials because Minerva and Lord Marcus stood by her. The Marquis's face softens with overwhelming emotion as he beholds his daughter safe and fiercely supported by her allies. Watching the emotional reunion, Rufus grips his chalice and silently notes that the time for action has finally arrived. Gathering a select few in a secure room, Rufus declares it is time to bring absolute justice down on Robert. Demanding absolute secrecy, Rufus begins to brief Marcus on the dangerous alliance Sophie is currently facing. Rufus reveals the betrayal began when Robert coerced Mia into exposing the top-secret underground passages vital to the Empire's border defense. Despite risking the wrath of his current bride-to-be, Robert irrationally cast Mia aside and clung to his former fiancée Sophie in a desperate bid for more information. Slamming Robert's notebook onto the table, Rufus explains the traitor only managed to steal a tiny glimpse of the route to the tower where Mia was caught. Sophie realizes Robert likely approached the sisters solely to infiltrate the passages, while an enraged Marcus curses the bastard for using her so callously. Sensing suspicious activity behind the noble house's unwavering support, Minerva questions why Robert would risk everything for the secret passages. Stepping into the dimly lit room, a disguised figure arrives to provide the desperately needed answers. The newcomer sheds his disguise as Jimmy Llewellyn, a highly skilled intelligence officer who infiltrated House Dylam to spy on Robert. Jimmy immediately exposes Robert's true nature, describing him as a man of pure filth who engages in outrageous and reckless affairs. Desperate to hide their complete financial ruin after failed mining ventures, House Dylam frantically rushed Robert's initial betrothal to Sophie. A horrified Sophie and her father listen in disbelief, realizing the man they once respected was nothing but a manipulative fraud. Noting an odd influx of illegitimate money into House Dylam, Jimmy prompts Minerva to question exactly what Robert was illegally peddling. Jimmy explains that Robert frequented brothels and taverns, expertly exploiting the loose tongues of those blinded by pleasure. Just as he manipulated Mia, Robert ruthlessly gathered and sold the drunken boasts and hidden gossip of careless nobles. Connecting the dots, an intense Rufus deduces that a specific wealthy buyer was aggressively hunting for the underground secrets of Gilgarin Castle. The true challenge remains identifying the elusive buyer, especially since the region's borders have remained deceptively peaceful with no direct attacks. The group pieces together that Gilgarin Castle's master artisan had apprentices who built fortifications across multiple allied nations. Though the various castle designs aren't perfectly identical, a terrifying realization begins to dawn on the gathered allies. Shock grips the room as they understand that decoding Gilgarin's mechanisms could effortlessly allow an enemy to exploit other allied fortresses. Jimmy explicitly points to the Kingdom of Lucindia, a crucial empire ally whose heavily defended castles share the exact same architectural lineage. Sitting at a vital military crossroads, Lucindia would instantly fall to an invasion if its intricate defense mechanisms were suddenly cracked. A grim-faced Jimmy finally names the looming, bloodthirsty threat eager to invade Lucindia as the dreaded Gaer Empire. Realizing Gaer could use Gilgarin's stolen secrets to topple Lucindia and threaten their entire world, the group grasps that Robert has committed unimaginable high treason.